Energy and Environment Committee to order. I'm joined by Mr. Blumenfield, and we'll start as a subcommittee. Actually, we're joined by Mr. Weiser as well, so we have a quorum. Mr. Prieto, let's start with item number 1.
Certainly, Mr. Chair. Good afternoon. Item number 1 relates to DWP CAO Office of Public Accountability reports relative to Navajo Generating Station asset purchase and sale and related matters. I have staff from DWP, CAO, and the OPA.
Good afternoon. We have a brief presentation I can go through, and then we'll open it up to any questions that you might have.
Brief is good. Thank you.
Okay. So we're looking today at the divestiture of our ownership interest in the Navajo power plant. And as you can see, our existing ownership is about 21%. And with this agreement going through, we'll end up with a 0% ownership interest. As some background, the Navajo generating station consists of 3 coal-fired units. Our share is about 477 megawatts. And you can see the existing contract ends in 2019, and we're looking at getting out of this a little early. This shows what our percentages are in coal as of 2010, 2016, and what they will be in 2025 when we'll divest of the Intermountain Power Project, going from 40% of our resource mix in 2010 coming from coal. After this, we'll be at 27%, and then again in 2025, we'll be at 0%. We've planned for replacing this resource for a number of years, and we've actually already procured the replacement, and it's a mix of some solar power and then a gas-fired unit to help balance that power. And we've got the Apex power plant, and then you can see Moapa Solar is in construction. Copper Mountain is actually in service. This chart just shows that if we can get out of this early, it helps us by essentially eliminating the amount of emissions produced by 1.75 million cars in a year in metric tons. So we have a significant benefit by getting out of this early. So we spent a number of years on this and have performed a lot of internal evaluation on what we thought the costs were. We had Goldman Sachs also provide a market value analysis, and then we have PFM provide to us an independent analysis of Goldman's analysis. So we really took a great deal of time in analyzing the costs and the benefits from the sale of this project. We've been looking at this for a number of years, and this is kind of shows the value of this plant, or it's really the value of the power coming out of this plant declining every year, each year, for the amount of time that we've been looking at selling this. And actually, it's just because of the cost of natural gas has continued to go down that the value of the power coming from this plant goes down. Therefore, the value of getting out or selling this contract or buying the balance of our energy resource keeps going down in value. So the market analysis by Goldman Sachs, you can see, 6 or 7 years ago, it was a high value, and as prices go down, right now it actually has a net negative value in terms of selling. But we've talked to Salt River Project, and they are interested for a number of other reasons in looking at purchasing this from us. And we actually looked at, well, what if we just keep it? And frankly, if we just keep this, the capital investment and a number of other investments are going to have an impact on rates requiring an increase of 2%. If we can sell it, the increase would only need to be 0.5% to support all of the new resources. So what are the components of this? We received $10 million at closing, and it's basically adjusted for the cost of power at 2020. We received some money for a coal mine settlement. We retain all the greenhouse gas emission credits and the transmission rights, which those are very key to us to retain transmission rights. We receive an ownership interest in 2 projects, which primarily is land and some more transmission. And then as this part of this project in the short run, we're also obtaining geothermal renewable energy from Salt River Project until 2021 at market rates, which was a resource that we already needed. So it's really a win-win. And then at the end of this, Salt River Project will make its best efforts at shutting down one of the units. So that's very important. When we leave this project, there will be a permanent reduction in greenhouse gas emissions. So in summary, kind of what is this? It results in the lowest impact to retail rates. It reduces greenhouse gas emissions from LA's power plants and leaves a permanent shutdown of one unit at the end at Navajo. We get additional geothermal energy to meet our renewable portfolio standard compliance, and it continues to implement our coal reduction strategy as outlined in our integrated resource plan. So with that, either myself or Min Lee would be able to answer any questions that you might have.
Very good. Let's hear from the ratepayer advocate.
Fred Pickle, Office of Public Accountability, ratepayer advocate. We believe that these exit agreements are reasonable in their terms and conditions and constitute a fair deal for ratepayers given the context of the negotiation.
Very good. Colleagues? Mr. Koretz.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I know I've asked DWP previously about the possibility of trying to find alternative energy sources like solar, wind, or geothermal projects within the Navajo Nation so that we can try to provide jobs for them, partly as a thank you for dealing with the environmental impacts of coal for all these years and delivering the power to Los Angeles. Have we looked at that, and are any of our plans in that direction?
We evaluate several hundred proposals each year for power, renewable power, and several of those will be located in the Navajo Nation. We evaluate each one on lowest cost, best fit. So far, there isn't one, but we look each year at what our integrated resource plan is, what our needs are, what our renewable needs are, and we do evaluate all of those proposals, and we'll consider any of them that anyone sends us. So we have reviewed some, they just at this point haven't fit right.
Well, rather than just take that approach, do we have any ability to apply any priority at all to those projects that are located at the Navajo Nation site?
At this point, we don't provide a priority to those, but we can look at those and look at how we might evaluate that and include that in our evaluation criteria.
Yeah, I personally would appreciate it, and I think it's certainly appropriate. Probably the bigger issue is this coal plant actually should be fully shut down. Do we have any leverage or way to help make that happen rather than just removing our portion of it?
Unfortunately, we can't. We don't have enough leverage to shut the entire project down, but we did utilize all the leverage we could to influence the reduction by 1/3 of the generating capacity at that location. So while we couldn't be 100% successful in closing it down, we were successful in getting a commitment to shut down one of those units.
Have we fully looked at every angle of ability to shut more, all of it down?
We did, but because we were only a 21% owner, the balance of the 80% and being in a different state, we used as much influence as we could to get as great a benefit as we could.
Yeah, very good. And lastly, have we planned any kind of a ceremonial thank you for the Navajo staff and Black Mesa crew for all of their work over the years, and should we be thinking about that?
It's something we should be thinking about. This doesn't officially close until about a year from now. We had to provide the agreement, the commitment, but we'll look at that sort of effort and event when we get closer. And again, all directions point to a closure in a year, but we'll make sure that it's going to close before we plan an event.
Very good. But obviously we'd have plenty of time to plan that event if we start thinking about it now. So, thank you.
Mr. Blumenfield.
Thank you. It's a very good project. Excited about finally closing this down, our port. In the summary, everything, the 4 points are all net positives. Is there any negative that we're not seeing here?
There's no negatives that we're not seeing. Probably the biggest negative that is the fact we weren't able to close this earlier and come to an agreement did reduce the value that we get, but nobody foresaw that the market would drop so significantly. So the only negative is it wasn't able to get accomplished 2 or 3 years ago.
Okay, and then, although according to page 10, our retail rate will go up by 0.5%. This action, this is where I'm getting confused. It's all very positive, but we're still having a rate increase of 0.5%.
Correct. What happens is our commitment to the project, if we can't sell it, we have to participate in some significant capital investments at that project, even though we leave in 2019, and some other operating costs and other upgrades that we are committed by contract to invest in. So if we can sell this early, we can walk away from those additional investments that we have to make in the plant, and it has less impact on our rates to leave than it does to stay, because we can get out of investing in those big capital efforts.
Okay, I guess it's just a perception of baseline. You know, if where we are now versus where we'll be in the future, it seems like it's not actually a rate increase in that sense. Or you're saying, because the rate increase is already built into the fact that we own this asset.
It is built in the fact that we already own this asset, yes. Mina, you've got to add something else?
Yeah, if I can add to that too. What we're talking about is an increase of 0.5% of the rate increase, not an increase of the entire rate structure. So if suppose we're going out with a 5% rate increase, and it's just 0.5% of that. So it's a very small amount of increase that we're talking about, and that is the cost of getting out of Navajo. Now, if we didn't do that, if we choose to stay in and continue to operate the plant or even sell the energy off, then we're looking at even a bigger rate increase of 2%.
2% of?
Of the 2% of the increase that we're going to be proposing. So suppose if we're going to propose a 5% increase, this be a fraction of that 5%.
So what is it based on? What is the percent increase that this is 2% or 0.5% of?
That's our current revenue requirements for 1 year. So that's a 1-year impact. We would have to look at a rate increase of being 2% if we stay in, or a rate increase of being 0.5% if we get out.
0.5% of what the increase is proposed.
Correct.
Which means we have to know what
I'm sorry, 0.5% of our overall revenue requirements. So at 100% of revenue, this adds 0.5% on top of it. So it's not 0.5% of 5%, or 0.00025.
I'm getting
more
confused because you were saying it's a percent of the increase, and you're saying it's a percent of the revenue.
Correct. And I think that's what you just said.
Yeah. I'm backing up Mr. Wright.
Okay. I'm not trying to catch it. I'm just trying to understand it. It's confusing. So it's of the revenue that we'll need it, because obviously we don't know what that increased. That's what kind of caught my attention is, well, that means we must be basing it against an actual increase, which I don't know what that is.
Right. It's based against the revenue that's being received. So if the amount of revenue coming in this year is 100%, if we keep this project next year, we'd have to say we need a 2% rate increase. If we get rid of this, we'll say we need a 0.5% revenue increase if all other things were equal. So this is compared to our overall revenues, not a portion of a proposed rate increase to come.
Okay, I think I get it. I'll may look at that a little further, but the 12% of the energy needs is what we were getting from this previously. And then on page 7, I think it was, you talked about, no, I got the page wrong. There's one of the pages you're talking about, page 5, where this is going. Do we have a breakdown of, this is where the renewables are going? Let me ask it this way. Does page 5 represent the 12% of the energy needs? And if so, what's the breakdown in terms of where we're making up that 12%?
Yeah. So this is what we purchased to replace the energy coming from Navajo, and it's coming from 2 solar projects and then a natural gas project to levelize and backfill the energy and provide a stable energy source. So this has all been purchased to replace that proportion of power we're getting from Navajo. Obviously, usually solar will take when we're getting the solar first, and then we'll balance it out with natural gas as the secondary provider. But since it'd be a passive production of energy from solar, we can go ahead and take that first.
Is there a breakdown in terms of where we're getting it from in terms of these, or is it pretty evenly split?
Your question on the reduction of the Navajo, right? Is that the question?
It's this page.
Right, I mean, what we're doing here, as I understand it, currently represents about 12% of our energy use, right? And
Yes.
we're making it up
Okay.
by, as I understand it, the three items on page 5 are going to make up that energy, that lost energy.
Mhm.
And so I'm just trying to understand if that indeed is the totality of where we're getting the energy from to make up the 12%, and if there's a breakdown, if not, that's okay too, of where we're, how we're making up that 12%.
So what we're trying to show on slide number 5 is the actions that we have taken to replace Navajo. So those actions are a combination of solar energy and Apex. Those actions have already been taken. But in addition to this, there's another component that we use to replace Navajo, and that is energy efficiency. So all three together, which I don't have the amount, the allocation to tell you right now, but all of the three elements, energy efficiency, renewables, and gas, would make up for the 477 megawatt that we replaced Navajo with.
Well, at some point, I'd like to, if you've actually broken that down in your predictions of what, how much we're getting from energy conservation, how much are we getting from the different sources, that would be useful to know.
And perhaps one additional thing to add to that, we purchase these to meet the renewable portfolio standard measures of 20%, 25%, 33%. So we tend to factor it in on the more overall approach to increasing the renewables in our portfolio. So when looking at replacement, we look at the larger picture of how can we add more renewables to meet our RPS standards. So we tend to look at that in the bigger picture than maybe the thought of...
Right, I'm taking the more simplistic idea of like, well, we're losing 12%, where's it going? Or, as opposed to the way that you have to, as an entity, you got to look at the bigger, important goals of our RPS.
Sure.
I get that. Thank you.
Very good. Let's go ahead and take public comment on this. Kent Minalt, Bill Corcoran are the only two cards I've got on this on item number 1. Come on up.
Oh, thank you. I'm Kent Minot. I've been working as a volunteer with the Sierra Club on the Beyond Coal campaign on this very issue of getting off coal since January of 2010, so I just wanted to come down and basically thank you guys and the DWP for your great work on this. There's several things in here that I think are worthy of comment beyond just the fact that we're actually getting off coal. This is the real reality of what we were celebrating back in March of 2013. I'm really happy to see although it's a small amount, the 55 megawatts of renewable geothermal energy that are coming as part of the deal. That is a door that should be opened wider, because also the increased transmission capacity that's part of the deal as well gives the playing field the DWP is playing on the opportunity to pull in more renewable resources from the Mojave area and other areas. And finally, I'm just really pleased that the point that you were asking about, Councilman Blumenfield, was about basically the fact that it's cheaper to get rid of this than it is to keep it. So the general rate picture, I think, is advantageous to all of us Angelinas at the same time. So anyway, congratulations to everybody. I'm really happy about this.
Good afternoon, Honorable Chair and Honorable Committee members. I'm Bill Corcoran. I'm the Western Regional Director for the Sierra Club's Beyond Coal campaign based here in Los Angeles. I'm here to talk in support of the resolution in front of you. I want to first give huge thanks and shout out to DWP staff, who I think have done strenuous, arduous, and very good work to finally land this. And in the theme of better late than never, I think that they came to an excellent agreement with SRP that will allow the city to exercise terrific opportunities on renewable energy generation, and they have kept important transmission options available so that you have geographic variety for the siting of those projects. On the issue of equity and the transition, I do want to point out that as part of the transition, the Moapa Solar Project that will provide some of the replacement power here and use existing transmission lines has proven to be an economic boon to the Moapa Band of Paiutes who live next to a coal plant that is now being retired. And this is the largest solar project on tribal land in the United States. So the city has been an important partner in creating that opportunity. I also want to say that while the Sierra Club is not thrilled about natural gas in any way in generation, the way that it's been approached here, in which you have purchased an existing plant, is a smart way to go. It's both, I think, economical, but it also avoids a 30 to 40-year capital investment in a natural gas plant. So it gives you great flexibility there as well. And I think I would also say, in terms of looking at the replacement power, it's important to remember not only energy efficiency, but also the importance of moving forward here in LA on the feed-in tariff so that we can continue to build out local solar power and local jobs here that help to stem the capital that was flowing out of this city to Navajo Generating Station and reinvest here. And then finally, I'll say that you're about to hear about the Springbok solar project, and the economics of that, I think, point to the very quick transition and reduction in price of renewable energy. So thank you. Very glad to be able to speak with you today.
Very good. Colleagues, let's go ahead and approve the department's request for authority to execute the proposed Navajo. Did you have something?
Yes, real quick. And I just wanted to thank the folks from Beyond the Coal campaign, because it was through the efforts of several years ago that this came to light, and not only for us to get off of coal by 2025, but also to look at our assets and evaluate the benefits to us. And at the end of the day, I think it's, like you mentioned, not only going to benefit us for the environment, but also it's a good economic decision overall. So thank you all for your work on this.
Very good. So we will approve the department's request for authority to execute the proposed Navajo Generating Station Asset Purchase and Sales Agreement, Term Energy Transaction Confirmation Agreement, and related transaction agreements as specified. Item number 2, Mr. Prieto.
Certainly. Item number 2, DWP CAO Office of Public Accountability reports relative to proposed Springbok 2 solar farm power sales agreement and related matters. You also have staff from DWP CAO and OPA.
Good afternoon. My name is John Dennis. I'm the Director of Power System Planning and Development with LADWP. And I just have 4 slides to kind of give you a quick overview of the particular project with Springbok 2. This particular project was selected out of 300 proposals as an addition to our portfolio, and it accomplished that criteria, as David just described, was the least cost and best fit criteria. It has a low cost of $58 a megawatt hour. That's about 10% cheaper or lower cost than the Springbok 1, and there's some reasons for that. Using some existing transmission capacity and as well some of the features, it has some future ownership options after the tax benefits expire. Physically, the facility is located 20 miles northeast of Mojave, California, just outside, along with a variety of other facilities right in this cluster area where we have a wind farm, our Barron Ridge station, which is collecting this, another project called Barron Ridge, Beacon Solar, and then also Springbok 1 and 2. And this is about 20 miles out of the Mojave Junction area. And this transmission corridor that's picking up these lines here was installed in around about 100 years ago by Mr. Mulholland, along with the hydro facilities up in the eastern Sierras. And so we're using those transmission lines, or those upgraded lines, to be able to bring some of that power down into Los Angeles along the same exact path. The specific location is right next to Springbok 1 and some of the other projects that we're doing. So it's just east of the 14 freeway and right across the street from an area where we have also developed with our wind farm. So Springbok 2 joins in with a collector station and comes into the hub at Beacon Substation. We're developing these projects here right now, and the particular features are that it's a 27-year term with an option for 3 more to extend to 30 years, 150 megawatts capacity. And as far as reaching our 33% goal, this is 1.7% or portion of that 33%. And then these are the target dates. We expect the facility to be in commercial operation of December 31st of 2016. So a real attractive project for the department, again, accomplishing those least cost, best fit attributes. And I'll be available if you have any particular questions on this.
Dr. Pickle?
What we're seeing in this project is the rapid decrease in the cost of photovoltaic projects. From 2.5 years ago, we were talking about projects in the 9-cent range, and this is now under 6 cents per kilowatt hour for these large-scale facilities. And we believe it's appropriate to go ahead with this project. We also wanted to thank DWP for taking most of our comments on the Springbok 1 transaction and including them in their analysis. Although we have one concern that should not hold this up, in that we think it's inappropriate to have ceiling and floor purchase prices for buyouts on these, but instead do the buyout at a market price at the time. But that should not impede the approval of this project.
Very good. Colleagues, questions? All righty. We've got public comment. Brian Barajas.
All right. I'm totally opposed to this project. Why? Look at the future. This is the future, where you're relying on renewable resources, but in the end, it's going to destroy everything. In the 60s, Kennedy had desalination nuclear power. Now you're here begging people to put up windmills or solar panels in the middle of a desert when you can green it. Bring in the water. FDR knew that project. Kennedy knew that project. And now you're all here thinking about putting up some damn solar panels when there needs to be a sun to do that. What happens to the rest of the days when there aren't no sun? And then you look at the energy sources that you accumulate in 1 year. If you're lucky, it'll amount to at least 400,000, or to them it's 397,000 and whatnot. So the future was nuclear power. We would have had 1 billion gigawatts or so of energy, and the price would have been cheaper. So you got to get this straight, all of you. If you don't get that you are in a crisis. It's a crisis. Forget about the green movement and the solar and windmills. They look awful, by the way, when you're driving down the road. Awful. It's a disaster. And the only reason why anyone adopts this policy is because everyone goes along with it. Nobody questions it. Nobody demands answers. To the context to which I bring this up. It's a crisis, and it's top down. We haven't had a FDR or Kennedy since these individuals died. And now you're in a crisis, and you think that you're going to save money. You think that you're going to save this universe. Forget it. So let this project die.
Colleagues, we'll go ahead and approve the department's request for authority to execute the proposed purchase agreement and related agreements that are associated with Springbok 2 solar farm as specified.
One question.
Mr. Blumenfield.
I was just looking at it. There's the lease agreement is for the landowners own it for like 25 years, but we have agreements for 30 years. Is there any sort of risk in terms of the last years, or I'm sure there's some arrangement about that, but why is there a difference in terms of the land lease contracts and our development agreement?
Randy Krager will come to the mic on that.
Good afternoon. The reason that the land lease is only 25 years is because that's just for the length of the PPA. There is an option to extend that, but then at the current lease rates for that land. So we didn't want to see anything go beyond the PPA for that value. But for the current land lease it's in, that's gone into consideration for the PPA price going forward.
Great, thanks.
Very good. That item is approved. Item number 3.
Certainly. Item number 3. DWP CAO reports relative to proposed amendment number 4, the existing agreement with Systems Integrated for the Castaic Power Plant Control System. Let's have staff from DWP CAO.
Good afternoon. I'm Eric Hartman, Manager Major Projects for the Power System, here to request a time extension on an automation contract we have currently with Systems Integrated. This contract has been going on for 5 years now. We need an extra 3 years. We're asking for 3 years extension. The reality is we only need about 2, but because of our past history with problems with our power plants, particularly in concerning Castaic, where we've had some outages that have interfered with our construction schedule, we'd like to have 3 just in case we encounter additional problems.
Very good. And there's no additional funding, correct?
Correct.
Very good. Colleagues, questions? Mr. Koretz?
One sort of in passing, while we're on the subject of Castaic. Given the drought, I wonder what the impacts might be to our power system if either the state or Metropolitan Water District has to draw water out of Pyramid Lake. Have we looked at that?
The water level for Pyramid Lake can be drawn down to about 8 feet relative there at Pyramid Lake before it impacts our generation capacity.
And what's it
beyond
down to
that,
now?
I'm sorry?
Do you know what it's down to now?
No, I'm not familiar with where it is now. But below that level, we will not be able to generate any electricity. But that means that now we'll have to rely on more of our gas-fired units as opposed to the hydro units that we're currently using.
So we should obviously keep an eye on that, because that
Yes,
it's
absolutely.
not an impossibility as we continue to drain our storage.
That's very true.
Mr. Davis, a good deal?
Good deal.
All right. Colleagues, any additional questions, comments, concerns? You're sure? Very good. That item is approved. Request authority to execute amendment number 4 to the existing agreement with Systems Integrated to provide hardware, software testing for the digital control system as part of the Castaic Power Plant Control System upgrade. Item number 4.
Number 4, Bureau of Sanitation report relative to submitting 5 enhanced watershed management programs to the Regional Water Quality Control Board. You have staff from the Bureau of Sanitation and the CAO.
You know, why don't we do this? As you all are setting up, let's go ahead and invite public comment to come on up. Samuel Unger, Paula Alva, Catherine Pease. Those will be the first 3 speakers. Come on up.
Good afternoon, honorable members of the Energy and Environment Subcommittee of the City of Los Angeles. I'm Samuel Unger, the Executive Officer of the Regional Water Quality Control Board, Los Angeles Region. I'm here today to support the Energy and Environment Subcommittee approval of the enhanced watershed management programs developed by the city today. As a bit of background, over 2 years ago, the Los Angeles Regional Board adopted a precedential municipal separate storm sewer system, that is MS4 permit, for the municipalities in Los Angeles County. The permit recognized both the challenges and opportunities of managing stormwater through the most cost-effective manner known, and that is through a watershed approach in which municipalities can pool their resources to develop projects at a meaningful scale. The permit also created a precedential compliance mechanism by which stormwater retention, infiltration, and multiple beneficial uses were prioritized due to the significant beneficial uses that these projects provide. Most importantly, the enhanced watershed management programs will secure a sustainable water future for the City of Los Angeles. The city and its environmental partners had a great role in fashioning the permit that the Regional Board adopted, and the City of Los Angeles has been a leader in developing enhanced watershed management plans for several years now. We urge you to support the enhanced watershed management program developed by your staff and support a sustainable water future for the City of Los Angeles. And I'm here to answer any questions if you may have.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Unger, for being
here.
Thank you.
My pleasure.
Good afternoon, Chair and committee members. My name is Paul Alva, and I'm the Stormwater Program Manager for the county unincorporated areas. I'm here to express support for the item. the county participated in the preparation of 11 enhanced watershed management programs countywide, including the 5 programs that the city is involved in. The county and the city have collaborated with over 30 partner agencies in our 5 watersheds. The watershed programs that we jointly developed are the most extensive planning efforts to date for water quality compliance. The measures incorporated in these plans offer multiple benefits beyond improving water quality at beaches and rivers and lakes, and that they will provide additional benefits, including habitat protection, recreation, and additional water resources. In conclusion, we appreciate the city's dedication to developing these comprehensive plans and for hosting a series of meetings to ensure public input was incorporated into these plans. Thank you for your time, and I urge your unanimous support.
Thank you to the county, Mr. Alva.
Good afternoon, council members. My name is Catherine Pease, and I'm the watershed scientist at Heal the Bay. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. I'm here today to highlight the need for the watershed-based management in the region and express our support of the EWIMP management approach and the item before you today. The physical size of Los Angeles and its population density complicate effective stormwater management. Managing stormwater on a watershed scale will help alleviate some of these challenges. Watershed-based management has many benefits. It allows stormwater to be treated more effectively and efficiently at strategic locations throughout watersheds using a variety of approaches. These include smaller distributed projects such as bioswales, green streets, low-impact development, and street sweeping, as well as larger regional projects that incorporate green infrastructure such as infiltration basins. These projects usually not only provide water quality improvements, but can also promote groundwater recharge, expansion of green space, new recreational facilities, and educational opportunities. In addition, the watershed approach can help to reduce implementation costs through cost sharing and treating multiple pollutants at the same time. It is important the city pursues an integrated approach to water in the future. We are in a serious drought, and climate change is likely to alter the water supplies that the region currently relies upon. Utilizing stormwater as a resource is important for long-term water sustainability. Watershed-based management can help achieve this. We cannot speak to the specific enhanced watershed management programs themselves, as we haven't had the opportunity to review them in detail, but I want to express Heal the Bay's support of watershed-based management in general, which was pursued by the city in these programs. It is critical that these programs are supported financially and implemented as soon as possible to harness the multiple benefits they can provide the region. We ask you to adopt the item before you today unanimously. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Liz Crossan and Becky Hyatt, please.
Good afternoon. I'm Liz Crossan. I'm the Executive Director for Los Angeles Waterkeeper, and I'm here in support of the concept of enhanced watershed management programs in terms of responding to the drought, as well as taking a multi-benefit approach. This is something that Waterkeeper and our partners have long supported, both green infrastructure on a large scale, but also looking at the distributed approach and the parcel-by-parcel management that we can do to retain stormwater on site. And I do encourage you on a future agenda to look at a watershed approach on a parcel-by-parcel basis and look at how we might incorporate that in our management of stormwater. Unfortunately, despite these available solutions and the fact that water quality standard compliance has been long required, permittees under the MS4 permit are hugely out of compliance. They're not meeting water quality standards, they're not meeting TMDLs. And as a result, LA Waterkeeper and NRDC filed 2 enforcement actions against 2 of the biggest contributors, being the City of Malibu and LA County. The City of Malibu case has since settled, but will result in major stormwater benefits for the coastline. The LA County case has gone up and down to the U.S. Supreme Court and the Ninth Circuit. Right now, we have liability against them, which could result in millions of dollars of penalties. The Clean Water Act requires, or at least allows, $37,500 per violation per day of the Clean Water Act. So this is all to say that while the EWIMPs might look expensive, I am here to remind you that non-compliance is very expensive, that it includes not only the penalties themselves, the public health costs, in addition to community costs, the impact on the economy due to stormwater pollution, as well as any litigation or court costs. So I do encourage you to support the EWIMS, but also to move as quickly as possible to fund their implementation. We need a suite of funding options, and I look forward to working with you on that. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Honorable Chair Fuentes and members of the committee. My name is Becky Hyatt, and I am representing Natural Resources Defense Council. I'm here to express our support for the EWIMP approach for stormwater management. Environmental groups have long supported a collaborative watershed-based approach to managing stormwater pollution. We have also consistently advocated for the use of green infrastructure and low-impact development techniques to control urban runoff, as these types of solutions provide both water quality and water supply benefits, something that's surely needed right now in light of the state's current drought conditions. The EWIMS provide a huge opportunity for the City of Los Angeles to not only improve the region's water quality, but also to augment its water supply through the types of multi-benefit solutions that NRDC has long been a proponent of. However, it's also important to remember that the number one goal of the EWIMS is to bring the city in compliance with its MS4 permit and Clean Water Act requirements. Therefore, we strongly encourage and endorse MS4 permittees to participate in the EWIMP, provided that they fully comply with the program development and implementation requirements pursuant to the 2012 LA County MS4 permit. At the same time, though, we do recognize that permit compliance comes at a significant cost, and that it's going to take a lot of resources and money for permittees to meet its MS4 permit requirements through the EWIMPs. It's going to take a lot of serious and hard work because the EWIMPs must be robust, well-defined, and fully comply with the requirements of the MS4 permit. And they must meet these requirements before they can be approved by the Regional Water Board. Resources are needed to not only help the city develop the WIMPs, but for the city to ultimately implement the proposed programs. After approval, the city needs to continue to commit adequate resources to implement the programs. So as long as LA Sanitation can demonstrate that the agency has complied with permit terms, NRDC will stand by the city to help pursue potential funding opportunities.
Thank you. Melanie Winter. Melanie, I'm going to need you to fill out for the rest of them too, because we want to make sure that you're recorded in the file.
Got it. Thank you. Good afternoon, gentlemen. I'm here to speak in strong support of adoption of these EWIMPs. As you know, and as the next item on the agenda demonstrates, the One Water Initiative is an effort to bring together the objectives of the EWIMPs and the Stormwater Capture Master Plan. And while both of these things looked at by themselves may seem expensive and difficult to accomplish, when these things become integrated, you can see that objectives to increase our local water resources through groundwater recharge help us very easily meet the TMDLs for metals. Best thing to do to remediate metals is put it through a sand filter, which is what most of the soils in the San Fernando Valley are. Getting stormwater to groundwater meets our TMDL compliance. Integrating these things in a way that you can see how spending money once to get two benefits gets us there a lot more quickly. This continued integration on the EWIMP and the Stormwater Capture Master Plan through things like enhanced collaboration on efforts and the One Water process are going to get us there more quickly. It's very useful for you to hear these things and these updates on the regular and always think of them both together. The objectives may seem separate, but in the end, working on them together in a more integrated way can save us money and can meet both those objectives much more quickly, more effectively, and by magnifying community benefits on the way to the result to help us meet numerous other goals in the sustainability plan, including climate adaptation and cooling in disadvantaged communities and throughout the city of Los Angeles, while also enhancing our biodiversity. So I encourage you to continue to think of these things not separate, but as integrated, and to support the Enhanced Watershed Management Plan. Our organization was founded to forward watershed-based planning in Los Angeles, and it's been really exciting this last 6 months to see that really accelerating. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Mr. Karagani and Mr. Hirano, come on up. Or sanitation, I don't know if you're ready, David, but...
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, council members. My name is Shriram Karagani. I'm the Watershed Protection Program Manager from Los Angeles Sanitation. We have a brief presentation that I would walk you through I have a copy of the slides also before you. As you may know, for the past many years, there have been many different plans that have been created in order to comply with the Clean Water Act. But I could mention to you that the Enhanced Watershed Management Program could be definitely the most extensive efforts that has taken place so far. Just very briefly, what is before you right now that we are asking you to authorize the Los Angeles Sanitation to submit our Enhanced Watershed Management Program to the Regional Board before June 28, 2015, as is required in our permit. We are also asking you to consider and adopt the mitigation measures that has been in the program EIR and adopt the CEQA requirement addendum that we have done to the county program EIR. And last but not least, there are 3 MOUs that 3 cities joined us, the city. We are asking you to also consider adopting those MOUs so they could have cost sharing with us, with the city of LA. So those are the items before you, sir. Very briefly, this is the background of Clean Water Act, not to walk you through, but what I could mention to you right now. After 40 years of these laws being on our books, going back to 60s, the Enhanced Watershed Management Plan now, after 40 years, are attempting to implement and comply with what was, passed in 1972, Clean Water Act, and also the prior, Port Clone of California. And that is in our permit, 2012 permit, that was adopted. These are series of deadlines that we have for TMDLs. The city of Los Angeles has 22 TMDLs. Some of the deadlines have already passed, so the city of LA is subject to what we call enforcement action, and that comes through a time schedule order. As you could see on the left-hand side, 2010, I missed my deadline for Cabrillo Beach, and also in 2013, I missed my deadline for dry weather compliance with dry weather bacteria in Bonnet Creek. So I'm already subject to 2 TSO, and each year that passes by, off of the 22 TMDs that I have, there would be more enforcement action. So the city of LA, we are, on behalf of the city of LA, LA Sanitation is leading in 5 watersheds. Those watersheds are Los Angeles River, Bonnet Creek, Santa Monica Bay, Dominguez Channel, and of course we are assisting the LA County in Marina del Rey. We are working with 25 co-permittees. So there are other partners within the watershed that are helping us in creation of these plans. And there are 22 TMDs. There are a lot of pollutants of concern. I just basically put 3 of them. These are the 3 famous ones that you hear because of most of our water bodies are fishable and swimmable. As a result of that, bacteria impacts the swimming part, and metals and toxic, they impact our food supply food chain, which is in the fish. So those are the examples of those. And as you could see, the 5 watershed goes from the beaches all the way to the mountains and inner cities. Everywhere is covered here. There are 3 basic categories of project in the Enhanced Watershed Management Programs. And we call them programs because there are more than projects. There are so many things in them. First and foremost, at the first line of defense is the low impact development. The LA Sanitation has been at this almost from 1990s, late 1990s, early 2000. So it is best to capture the polluted runoff at the parcel if we can, and that's through our LID capturing what we call 85 percentile of every rain event. If for whatever chance we cannot and the water escapes from our parcel, we go to the second line of defense, green streets and green alleys. And again, we have a series of guidance and a handbook regarding how we should approach the green street and green alleys. Last but not least, if that's the second one, if also the water escape from our streets, which is the streets are basically the transport of the LA Stormwater Program, part of our system. We have regional projects that we deal with them before the polluted water ends up to our receiving water, which is the ocean. So the programs before you were created through a very extensive outreach program with our communities throughout the city, and lots of the state-of-art computer modeling and programming based on the input of our community members, and based on our computer modeling, every watershed has a unique recipe for compliance. I just mentioned one of them. For instance, in Marina Del Rey, it mentioned that based on the input of the community on output of our computer models, we are going to have 75% green streets and low-impact development and 25% regional. So each of these recipes are unique to the watershed. Example of some of these projects are that our priority within the city is if we can infiltrate, we would infiltrate. So that's number one priority. If we cannot infiltrate, then we would capture and use. And last, if we cannot capture and use for whatever reason, most 90% of the things are captured in the first two right now. If we cannot, then obviously we have to use bioretention and biofiltration before treat and release. These are some of the examples, North Hollywood, and the beauty of these projects are that they are multi-purpose. It's not just the compliance, which is the city it has to comply because of our permit. They provide, as you see, open space, augment water supply, recreation, habitat, flood protection, healthy community, so on, and economic, stimulus, for the local areas. I could go on the benefits that they have regarding climate change and so on and so forth. But these are examples. We have projects that the projects are under the park, and above the park people are playing soccer, baseball, and what have you. As far as the street, green streets are concerned, the lower part is the Elmer Paseo that we have done. This is the alley that used to be just blocked, but as you could see, it has now become green right now. And the other pictures are the LA Zoo that we have used porous pavement. And if you put water with the hose right now at almost 60 psi, the water right in front of your eyes would disappear. Right then and there would infiltrate. Those are examples of projects that we have done. And then we have the Palmetto Street that we are proposing that we could use, porous pavement and pavers. And one technical part that I like to say, we do have enough technology to make sure that the water would not undermine the street just as a side effect. So we have been talking about compliance and what happens right now, but besides compliance, in this drought that we are in right now, if we implement the enhanced watershed management programs, we are going to provide 90,000 acre feet, per year of water supply right now, and this is going to be 60% of the city goals, both mayors and council goals that they have put for the city for us to comply, of reducing import of water by 50% by 2025. So it goes a long way toward, other goals that the city has besides compliance issue. This also helped with the Alternative 20 and LA revitalization and other plans that we have in the city. This is an example of the regional project. As you see, the map is crowded. It's everywhere right now. There are projects throughout the city of Los Angeles right now. This does not include the green street and green alleys. If I would have put that, the entire map would have been just black, full of dots right now. But just to show you that, the extent of these programs. Just a couple of words regarding economic multiplier right now. As you could see, these are actual scientific studies and economic studies that has been done. For every $1 million in water quality investment that we do, there's going to be $22 million added to benefits or avoided costs. And I could be happy to share with you that economic report. This is a too crowded of table, but it is a very interesting table. It shows all of the TMDLs that we have. It shows their deadlines. It shows how much money Prop O has helped us to meet what percent of the TMDLs we have met. So it goes through all the 22 TMDLs based on the watershed and which one we have met, which one we have not met right now. But very briefly, in summary, the Prop O has helped us to meet 100% of the trash. So full compliance of trash throughout the city. And it has also helped us to meet dry weather bacteria for the Santa Monica Bay right now, which is most of the TMDLs are for both wet weather and dry weather. So that's for that one. But this goes and shows you percentage by percentage how much investment we have made, where, and how much more we need to do in order to be in full compliance. The previous speakers mentioned that the dollars are huge. That's the biggest challenge of a stormwater program. And as you could see right now, it comes in the billions right now. But we cannot overnight to get to the billions right now. We are requesting approximately $100 million a year for us to ramp up to those compliance dates that we have, and these are not in distant future. These are just last year, this year, and next year. The enforcement of the permit is as you have heard right now, is $37,500 per pollutant per day right now, and this is per pollutant. I have 192 of them right now. They add up fast in millions of dollars, not in years, in weeks and months. And third-party lawsuit also that would create less flexibility for the city. Just a couple of comments regarding, we did a program EIR through LA County because they're involved with all of the watershed. We are very thankful to LA County, and we went ahead and added, addendum to it to make it customized for City of LA, and that's what this chart is all about. And approval of your item before you, would allow me to submit them to the Water Board. And that concludes my presentation. I would be happy to answer any question.
Very good. Mr. Hirano, would you like to add anything before we start with questions? No. Okay, very good. A couple of observations. I think Ms. Winters did a very good job of sort of helping us understand that there's a way for us to tie all of this together with the regime of One Water and trying to understand how we can seize the opportunity of multiple benefits across multiple challenges that we've got. And so to that end, a couple of observations. It seems that whether the drought breaks or not anytime soon, this is a liability that is facing the ratepayers for the foreseeable future. And understanding that Prop O was a success in a category, it's far from an overall success in sort of the challenges that we've got. So it really, I think, begs a question about what our funding strategy is going to be, and it's going to be one of my instructions that we talked a little bit about, to have you all come back and report to us on how it is that we can begin to fund these challenges. But before we get to that piece, I think the plan and the EWIMPs that are before us are incredibly important, and I know that we've got representatives from the county and the Regional Water Quality Board here today, and thank you for being here with us. I think it's very important for us to continue the collaboration. But in the loading order of how it is that we're going to solve these challenges, how is it that we are going to coordinate what it is that we have in our plans? And to me, before we sort of get to that piece, we're going to get comments back, is my sense, from the Regional Water Quality Board. Will we have, as a council, an opportunity to review those comments before they're finally adopted by the Regional Water Quality Board?
The answer is yes.
Okay. And so that would be an instruction that I'd like for you all to come back, because their comments, I think, while supportive already, when we get into some more detail understanding how it is that they believe we could be more effective, I think that's going to be important to us. That being said, speak to us about how it is that you're coordinating all of the projects that you have before, not just sanitation, but before you from a TMDL MS4 perspective. I know that the estimate is about $7.4 billion if you were to just price out the solutions, but I have to imagine that the capital improvement projects in the city of Los Angeles, some of the other opportunities that are before us, will help us make that number smaller. How is that coordination going to take place?
Okay, so on two fronts right now, Mr. Chair. As far as prioritization of the projects, as you know, we have the TMDLs and I have their deadlines when they're coming. And I also have a very extensive monitoring that I have the pulse of all the water bodies. I'm answering you the technical part, that how I prioritize the project. The deadlines and monitoring result that I have help me to prioritize the project. So that's how the programs and all hotspots are identified first. Now, as far as having how we are going...
On that point, can I just sort of interrupt
Yes.
you? So what are the lessons learned from 2012 and 2013 where we didn't meet the compliance? I know it's largely a funding thing,
Yes.
but if we're going to cue the order by the deadlines and the levels that we need to be at, we've already sort of failed on the first two. What are the lessons learned, and how do we sort of make sure that we get to a place where we're not going to be penalized?
Correct. So the two examples right now, Mr. Chair, was 2010 in Cabrillo Beach. We have a beach in San Pedro. For that beach, the city had spent more than $20 million in order to mitigate bacteria, but the actual monitoring results showed that the variation of exceedance was not not too much different than when we started. So as a result of that, because we missed the deadline of April of 2010, we worked with Water Board, but Water Board recognizing that we have done everything in our toolbox at the beach right now, changing the sand, putting bird exclusion devices, putting outreach, removing and diverting all of the storm drains, the sewer lines, everything from the beach. They worked with us to give us the time schedule order. And time schedule order is the enforcement mechanism that I have to do a specific thing by a specific time in a short period of time. Usually maximum is 5 years, but it's usually less than that. So the lessons learned for that one was that, of course, that's just one example of that. The lessons learned for that was that even though we had done everything, there are other things that we should have looked at, which was some of the humans coming and feeding the cat, the feral cats, and raccoons. So I had to have the outreach program for them. But there is other challenges regarding raccoon. We have injunction on animal issues. But putting that aside, that was one lesson there for myself. Moving right now to the Bonnet Creek bacteria TMD, Mr. Chair. I actually, though I had a plan, there was not enough proper funding for me to fund. So as a result of that, they were not too much, I had done institutional issue, meaning that I had swept the streets, I had cleaned the catch basin, I had done the enforcement, but actual projects, we were not as good as, in a Cabrillo. So it was a difficult challenge for us to pass before the Water Board to get a TSO. So the lessons learned in my mind for these two TSO that I have so far, if we have done, the city has done its best in order to comply, and we still have not complied, there is a relief for us through some kind of, extended schedule. But we have not done anything. This is just we have not done anything in the watershed. And these TMDLs came for the past 10, 15 years. They didn't come yesterday or the day before yesterday. So those are the lessons I have learned myself regarding the watershed. As far as coordination within the city, we are working on monthly basis with Water and Power to make sure that all their projects, our projects are all consolidated, and if there are opportunity to leverage our resources, we should. I work with the entire public works to make sure that if they are doing programs in the streets and other places, that we could have a stormwater as a part of it. I am doing that. We have created a 5-year CIP capital improvement program based on priority that I mentioned, that I would be sharing with the CEO, Mr. David Hirano. So it is all above a strategy and your public street motion, because the streets are important part, are the major source of pollutant and also our major opportunity for us to mitigate them. Once you have your motion and ordinance adopted and make it in a part of LAMC, that goes a long way for us to meet our TMDLs. So, and then we have LID programs, volunteer LID programs for the public to become watershed manager at their parcel level. I could go on and on and on. It takes all of those efforts to come in public, private, to meet this challenge that we have before us.
Very good. Adele, did you want to jump in?
Adele Hashkali from Bureau of Sanitation. Just to add to what Sharam said, I think the lessons learned from us is how we prioritize the projects within the EWIMP, the Enhanced Watershed Management Plan. And that's going to be a interesting challenge. It's now prioritized based on getting the maximum benefit to water quality. It's all based on the model. So really, we need to make sure the investment is made is to provide us the compliance with the schedule to ensure those are done. The good news about the Enhanced Watershed Management Plan and the UMS4 permit is the interim limits are not, as long as you're in compliance with your plan set forth in your Enhanced Watershed Management Plan, you are in compliance with the permit. The interim limits of reduction are not applicable in this case, which is a good thing. So it gives us a lot more flexibility as compared to before, where we had to even meet interim reduction limits, not just the end date, but actually as we move forward. So, the prioritization, I think, is critical. And to add to something you said, Mr. Chair, is really for us to bring this down from its magnitude down to something it's not going to be manageable, it's still going to be a challenge, is we need to make sure everything we do in the city, everything we do in this watershed has to integrate stormwater management as part of its basic functions. Whether it's a street, a sidewalk, it's a light rail project, a private development, public development, a private project, And all that has to be done as part of a holistic plan. And I think that's what we need to continue working with your leadership and to ensure that that is being done across the city. And that's really the way we're going to be able to deal with it. Because there's multi-benefits and there is added benefits across the board. But if we do it as part of everything we are implementing anyway, I think it's going to make a dent and allow us to reach our compliance faster with hopefully some manageable costs.
Sure. No, I couldn't agree more with you. To take it, to put a finer point on it, I mean, the TMDL MS4 issue should really belong to more than just the Department of Sanitation. It should belong to all of us that touch water. So to that end, is there a formalized process that is coordinating all of these efforts? I know that you're working remarkably well with the Department of Water and Power, but in terms of Bureau of Engineering, everybody else who has the opportunity to touch water or a street, which I believe is the primary conveyance system to stormwater, is that formalized? I know that the mayor has his water cabinet, but where is it that we can go to see the coordination in action?
So, Mr. Chair, as far as within the Public Works, I have a monthly CIP meeting, a Capital Improvement Program meeting. That includes Bureau of Engineering, sometimes Bureau of Street Services come. So that's one venue that we share all of this information. Also, on monthly basis, we have Green Street and Green Alleys Committee, which board member Heather Repairing is chairing. So that's the entire 40 departments that are coming and talk about their green projects and green alleys and what they're doing right now. So that's another committee on a monthly basis. Last but not least, within the permit, it requires me to meet with all the city departments, from police to fire to animal shelter, to make sure that their activities that they're doing are having minimum impact on the water quality. So those are the three venues, and of course we have the water cabinet on a monthly basis. We have water and power department on a monthly basis. I have Rec and Park meeting on a monthly basis. So I have so many meetings all on a monthly basis, and the discussion is usually leveraging our resources and doing green projects.
Sure. No, I think it's good. It just, to me, leaves sort of the question about how it is that we can govern this subject a little bit better. It seems like there's lots of meetings, which is good, but it seems like there really ought to be one meeting that would be better. So let me ask you, shift gears a little bit here. So we've seen successes in regional approaches like in Elmer Street. Hopefully in short order, the work that this committee and myself have done on the streets sort of punch list on trying to figure out how to deal with water will come and go. What are we doing on, and that slide was fantastic, what are we doing more on site-specific type of contamination and opportunities?
I want to make sure I understand. That means that getting to the source to get into the pollutant at that source?
Right. So that chart that you had was, or the slide where you see sort of a regional approach, you see the street approach,
right,
and then the site-specific source of the contamination. I understand what we're doing. Need lots of money for the CIP and for regional approaches, and lots of red dots on your slide. I see, hopefully the punch list that we're creating that mandates every department that has the opportunity to touch dirt and water to have to follow a certain criterion. Then you've got, to me, sort of the unanswered opportunity, which is site-specific contamination and how it is that we're trying to sort of move the needle there. What are we doing there?
Yes. Thank you for clarification. So within the permit, Councilmember, there is a program. It's called Inspection of All Commercial Industrial Facilities. So I have two-part answer for you. For industrial and commercial facility, I visit them, I inspect them. I inspect them on enforcement inspectors, inspect them on each year. I have their water quality, I have their output, monitoring output, and if they are exceeding some of the standards we have put for them, we ask them to come in compliance by implementing series of best management practices on site. So that's for commercial, industrial throughout the city, and I inspect them once a year. If they're in compliance, that's once a year. If not, we have follow-up. At the parcel level right now, not commercial, industrial, we have the source control. Again, on daily basis, I'm monitoring the entire pulse of the entire rivers, lakes, creeks. So if I see any kind of variation that is exceeding our expectation based on what we have done, then we do source control those are actual, technical terms to find out what is the source of that pollutant, and then we address them right now. And that, starting from receiving water, going to tributary to the outfall to see what is maybe the source is over irrigation and doing fertilizing. Then we do have an outreach for that specific gardeners of that community that please do not fertilize and water at the same time. As an example, I'm using that as an example. But we have similar thing, or finding the source is the illegal connection of a restaurant to our storm drain. Then we cut that one. So we have those programs that deals at the parcel level source control.
Got it. And I'll let my colleagues get in here with this last question. So we're partnering with 3 cities, which is good news because the contamination doesn't know district boundaries or city boundaries. And I guess the bad news is that we're not doing this as regionally as we could, sort of county-wide, so we're going at it because we can't afford to wait any longer. Help me understand how it's going to work with these partner cities, and are there more people that we can sort of join together? Because it seems to me that if we leveraged and brought to scale some of these solutions, that it would be not only cost-effective for the ratepayer, but ultimately might help us accomplish our goals sooner. Help me understand this MOU.
Absolutely, Mr. Chair. So currently we are working with 30 agencies. You heard 25, the LA County is in all of our watershed. So if you count them once, so there are 30 agencies within our watershed, Upper LA River, Bonnet Creek, Santa Monica, Dominguez Channel, and of course we have the Marina Del Rey. So all of those folks that are in the same watershed that we have, 30 of them, the plan that you saw right in a brief description of that, they are partnering with me. So I have MOUs with all of them. These 3, they were late comers right now. I offered them at the beginning, for whatever reason, they wanted to create their own plan. But when they saw the extensive, effort required, they came late. So I have 27 other MOUs that have already been implemented. Okay. These were the latecomers right now.
Got it. Okay, very good. Shame on them. All right, colleagues, any questions? Good for them for joining.
Exactly.
Mr. Blumenfield?
No, good for them for joining. I'm excited about that. We were talking about having all the meetings to get everybody engaged, and I just, critically important, I'm worried about some of the things, like as we move forward with sidewalks, making sure that that's part of it, and not only in terms of leveraging the money that's already being spent, some of that may have prohibitions on it in terms of, if we're adding in certain elements, we may have to come up with additional funding above what the Willits money is. And so we need to sort of identify that early enough so that we can make sure that that gets budgeted in as well as leveraging the existing dollars. So that's, and I know you're working on that. And
I fully agree. We are working on that, sir. Yes.
Great. And then maybe to the funding stuff. I mean, how much in terms of actual dollars are we suggesting for the stormwater pollution abatement fund?
This is just purely, a suggestion right now. We are asking that for us to ramp up toward those big dollars that you saw in 22 TMDLs. We are asking for approximately $100 million a year. But that being said, I'm thinking of $100 million would be used as a debt finance, as a collateral for us to borrow some money, so to carry us for the next few years.
So to translate that into what would mean to the typical resident, and a single-family home with a typical, lot, would probably see if that is going to be converted into directly purely a fee, that's around $50 probably a year.
Yes.
That's really what, just to put it in the ballpark figure. And however, I think is the more collaboration, the more leveraging we do, that is going to get down and down and down and addressed. And if so, the financial plan and the funding, I think, is something that we will work with the CEO at the direction of the committee and the chair as to how we develop that. But I just want to make sure I put it in perspective. $100 million a year is seen as a lot of money, but if you just turn it into what it means for a single-family home, it's about $50 roughly a household a year. That's the number.
Because is that a certain portion of the fund? I mean, how much is the overall fund?
Right now, Shahram, is we are. It's about, we bring about $28 million a year from the Stormwater Pollution Abatement Fund, which has not been increased. 1992 was the last time it was looked at. and that's average is roughly $23 a household, roughly less?
Yes, no, $23.
23 right
Yes.
So this would be $50
Above.
above the 23.
Correct.
But that's,
70
I'm just giving,
generically, I know we
Correct,
don't have the
correct.
exact numbers, but we're talking about adding, this wouldn't be supplementing or supplanting the addition, the money that we already spend out of that fund. This is really above and beyond.
Yes.
Is
Yes.
that right?
yeah, and it has to be done through a comprehensive plan. It's, I just want to make sure that we're not proposing that at this point.
And I get it, we're not, I don't want to scare anybody.
Yeah.
But the other thing is we could bond against it in the future. If whatever amount that you put out there becomes a revenue stream,
Sure.
and that, because a lot of these things, you know, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure, and you can do some of this stuff up front, and it'll save us money down the road in terms of money that we would have to put into that fund. So.
And we talked, I mean, every dollar that you, as a revenue, you can actually bond against and get up to $10 in terms of capital investment. But some of the creative thinking that we have to all do and work together on is this, monetizing stormwater. Is there a value for stormwater that's being captured and infiltrated and reused? Is there a value there to be used?
That'll offset.
If we ever break that question, it's going to help us create a revolving fund, because there's a value now to that asset, to that water, and I think that's the discussion we all have to have. It's not free water. It's, once we treat it, it has some value, and if we're capturing some value to it, I think it's going to at least offset that cost.
It changes the whole dynamic.
Sure.
I mean, it's especially as the price of water in the drought situation is going up and up and up.
Mm-hmm.
The value of that water is also going up, and if you can monetize it, it creates a positive cycle.
Sure.
Financially. So I mean, this is exactly the kind of program that, when you talk about a finance model, this is, central casting for a finance model, because you're going to put more money up front.
Very good. Mr. Kretz?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Obviously, I like the idea of watershed approach, because I don't think we can even afford to meet these compliance guidelines if we just try to treat stormwater. But if we can do 2 or 3 things at the same time, obviously that's great. One place where we've had plenty of funding and haven't done it yet relates to what we're doing with turf removal. So we're literally changing the landscape of the city of Los Angeles, and yet we're not really giving any direction as to how to do it. So people could be grading their properties appropriately to capture the stormwater, but we're not making them do it. We're not incentivizing them to do it. It seems like we're not even focusing on that. And we've just dramatically increased the program that we'll be a part of at the MWD level, where we went from $100 million, which was already a stretch, to an extra $350 million for turf removal. So presumably that translates to massive turf removal in Los Angeles. So hopefully we can take a quick look at that. And I wonder if we even know financially how much of an impact that would be on our compliance numbers. And if we don't know, I wonder if when the chair's report comes back on other subjects, we could include that as well, what we think the savings would be.
I don't think I understand the question. What is it? What's the question, Mr. Kretz?
The question is, how much would we save in stormwater requirement costs if we were treating every lawn and taking a property by property, parcel by parcel approach to stormwater treatment? So if we're going to pay to remove your lawn, you have to grade it properly and set it up so it actually can lead to stormwater capture rather than just run off into the streets and the storm drains. So if you can give us a number so we know financially how valuable that is, and if we have a plan, or if you can have thoughts of a plan when you come back.
Absolutely. I would be happy to. I would work with Mr. Hirano to make sure that if every parcel, they do their good deed as far as the stormwater, how does that impact the $8 billion price tag that we have. I would be happy to.
One thing that we are working on, just at least with some of the NGOs and the River Project and others, we're actually developing a voluntary residential improvements to your property to be LID compliant, which is a voluntary, and we're trying to figure out how we get that, and we're developing actually guidance for the parkway and for how to manage runoff in a better way. That guidance is actually developing standard plans too, but that's something that we're going to probably bring forward soon. I think it's almost developed and done to encourage. I agree with you that as we are replacing and removing turf and putting in native plants, if it's graded right and done right, I think it can probably provide benefit. The challenge is quantifying it and looking at it. I think it's done right. I think there is a number that we can quantify. So I think it's a good suggestion. I think we have something that we're working on, but I think we'll integrate that through our efforts, and we'll work together with our partners in Water and Power and MWD to ensure those guidance are provided to the residents and to the property owners who are doing the changes to ensure that there is actually a recommended way of doing it.
Yeah, at a minimum, there should be best practices that we can guide them in. Even better if we can incentivize or require those best practices to be used. Seems like that would save us a lot of stormwater costs. Also, most of our requirements related to what winds up in the storm drains and ultimately goes into the bay. And the question is, if we were able to divert virtually all or all of our stormwater into the sewer system and actually treat it, would that eliminate all of our requirements, or are there other places where that stormwater causes trouble as well?
Currently, Councilmember, our system are separate, so the design criteria for the both. During dry condition, summer months, we do have capacity in our sewer pipes right now that we could divert what we call minimum flow, dry weather flow. But if during the actual storm events, if we combine them, then, because the system was not designed for a combined system, we have to make sure the water that gets in is not going to surcharge the sewer pipes, so they would be coming up to the streets right now. But case by case site specific, we could look at them for a first flush, but as just a basic thing, there are two separate systems.
Have we ever looked at setting up treatment plants along the storm drain system and treating stormwater rather than letting it flow all the way through the system? And is it practical? And did we look at it as impractical, but could it be practical now that we have these massive obligations?
Actually, based on the funding that we have, Councilmember, we have done series of projects along for instance, LA River. North Atwater, the polluted water comes before it goes to Los Angeles River. We clean it, we cleanse it, and then it goes to LA River. So that's just one example. The other one is the Councilmember Ed Reyes, Greenway project. Again, these are what we call street ends. Before the water goes to LA River, they go through a filtration system, which is our green project. So we have example of the projects that you're saying, but because of, again, challenge of funding, do I have thousands of them along the LA River so the water become purified? So we have example, but to take the limit of them to have every outfall that come to LA River or Bonner Creek cleansed, that's where the costs come. And that's one issue, but having project at the end of the pipe is not something that community wants to see. They want to see projects that they get involved in their backyard, in their streets, so having end of the pipe solution sometimes is warranted, but it's not something that communities, they want to see in their neighborhood.
But one of the things that we are looking at, I think is going to be part of the One Water planning that we're working on, as we're seeing more water conservation, our wastewater flows are down. So there is an opportunity to, in some areas, that we can capture highly polluted storm water with control of how much water, because you don't want to inundate your system. Do it in a way that you can utilize the available capacity and treat the water, especially as we are expanding our water reuse and recycling. It becomes now a resource. And I think that opportunity is something that we are seriously looking at in some of the watersheds and some of these areas, because it will provide us a more sure way of compliance and addressing the high pollutants. But at the same time, we are reusing that water, and now we're creating more water to do more recycling that we need, because water conservation actually, in a good way, it's a good thing, and in another way, it's actually reducing our wastewater that we use for recycling. So it has a kind of an interesting balance. But I think that's an interesting thing that we're actually looking at in some places. We actually built the Santa Monica project in the Smurf, the urban runoff project down by the Santa Monica Pier. It's a joint between the city and Santa Monica that was purely to do a reuse of polluted stormwater coming into Santa Monica Bay, and that was a joint effort. The cost was extensive, and it was just too high, and distribution was a lot more difficult. But I think if we integrate it through our existing wastewater reclamation plant, the recycled plants, I think it may make a lot of sense and maybe take some of that dent and help us put more water in the system to recycle. So it's something that we are working with. It's a great suggestion. I think it's something that we can look at. It doesn't solve everything because the volume of runoff is so huge during rain that just cannot be managed. But I think we can manage maybe the pre-flush or the polluted water in the beginning, and then limit that, and then maybe at the end of the rain event. But we will work through it as we're talking about.
Very good. And one last question, just to clarify something you said earlier. I know at one point, to me, it sounded kind of hopeless because we had all these deadlines to meet and almost an impossible task. I think we have a very good plan here, and I commend you for putting it together. Are the regulatory agencies and environmental groups, is everyone working with us cooperatively at this point and saying, well, we recognize that you're doing everything you can, so we're not going to fine you when you miss some of our initial deadlines? How collaboratively are we working? And if we do all the stuff, which I think is very admirable, and every possible thing we could fund, how will the agencies react to that?
Councilman, we have a very, very, very close relationship with all of our environmental groups in our region, and also our both US EPA, State Board, and Water Board. But in my opinion right now, the job of the Regional Board and State Board, Councilmember, is for them to enforce Clean Water Act. And as long as we are doing things and doing projects, then I could see that they would be collaborating with us. For us, not having funding is not, in my mind, a good defense that because I don't have money, I cannot meet that. And based on I'm not an attorney, but I have read all the Supreme Court cases back from 1972 to up to right. There is no legal case that I'm aware of that because you cannot afford, you have to be absolved of your commitments.
No,
but we work very closely.
We're talking about putting a lot of money into this and a lot of great projects, and if we do all of this and more, are we still going to get whacked, or are we going to be working collaboratively and working towards a common goal that we all agree on?
I think Mr. Hajkali made that point, but just to amplify it, as long as we are going to implement the plans that is going to be approved by Water Board, we have protection or compliance with the pollutant. Even though if you take the sample, for instance, for interim limits, let's say the sample says, I'm just making up example, 2 milligram per liter, I'm 4. But implementing the plan, because on yearly basis I report what I have done to the Water Board. As long as we have implemented the plan, we have protection for not meeting the specific target that I have.
Very good. Thank you.
So since we have the regulator here, we'll go ahead and afford very generously Mr. Unger an opportunity to address the committee, understanding that we will come back with a funding proposal. We have every intention to meet our obligations, but if you'd like to impart some knowledge as to what you think we should be considering, we greatly appreciate it. And thank you for your support of this EWIMP, by the way.
My pleasure, and thank you for your efforts and the great progress that the city has made and the leadership it's provided to other municipalities in Los Angeles County. I think what I'd like to do is take Councilmember Koretz's questions backwards, if you will, which is the first one is, are we going to fine you type thing? And I can't sit here today and say that there's not going to happen. But what I can say is we've been working very collaboratively with the city in developing these plans. We meet regularly with the city and all the other municipalities as well in the County of Los Angeles to discuss their plans as they're in development. To make sure that they know what our requirements are and give them every guidepost so that they can submit plans that can be approved. So I think it's been a very collaborative relationship. And I will say that our board is very interested in essentially the success of this approach. They went out on a limb to adopt this watershed MS4 permit against some opposition. And, there still remains some opposition to it on, I guess, several grounds. But in general, there's support for it. And our board has really directed staff to reach out to State Board where there is going to be funding available through Prop 1 for various types of projects that are going to be forthcoming through these EWIMP plans. And on a staff-to-staff basis, we've started that dialogue. We understand that due to the proactivity of both the permit and the city, that the plans are far more developed than they are in other parts of the state. And the State Board staff, who's going to be responsible for ultimately evaluating those plans with the help of the regional board here, I think we're in good stead to, possibly get some funding in the early portions of this. And our board is very active and very directive to us as staff to try to pursue those funds to essentially assist all the cities comply with the MS4 permit.
Very good. Thank you. With that, without any objection, we will go ahead and approve the Board of Public Works recommendations and would ask the CAO to work with the Department of Sanitation to report back on funding options for implementing the EWIPs. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
All right, let's go ahead. We still have 4 more items here. Let's go ahead and take item number 5.
Item number 5, Public Works reports relative to the status of the Water Integrated Resources Plan and transition to the One Water LA 2040.
Good afternoon, Honorable Chair and Council members. My name is Doug Walters. I'm with Sanitation. I'm the Project Director for the One Water Los Angeles Plan. It's always a privilege and an honor to be before you to talk about the One Water effort, this collaborative, comprehensive effort to manage all water as One Water. I'm joined by my esteemed colleague, David Pettyjohn, the Director of Water Resources. We're going to go through a very brief presentation of Phase 1 of the One Water Report, which you should have received a copy of before you. We will highlight some of that. And Dave's going to go ahead and start.
So for quite a while, decades actually, the city's been facing a lot of water management challenges. You've heard some of those here today, including aging water infrastructure, aging wastewater facilities and infrastructure, and various regulatory requirements, environmental needs, supply restrictions, growing dependency on imported water supply, and more recently the challenges of climate change and drought. So the fact that all these challenges and the areas of responsibility they impact are shared by more than one city department established the need to have a citywide integrated strategy for water. And this recognition resulted in the 2006 city IRP, Integrated Resources Plan, which we're now evolving into the city's One Water Plan. So this idea has been around the city for quite some time. It's going to evolve into a much more robust effort. So to understand the One Water LA plan, it's instructive to take a look back at some background on the city's initial IRP, which was the foundation we're building the One Water Plan on. And what you see here, it was adopted by the council in 2006, as I mentioned, and it was essentially a time horizon, a planning horizon of 2020, and it integrated facilities planning for water, wastewater, and runoff management programs. So here's the good news, is that city IRP that was adopted by the city in 2006 resulted in a lot of deferment of water projects in the city and resulted in saving the city over $500 million. So a few of the projects, the larger projects that got deferred due to the city IRP were the Hyperion Solids Handling and Truck Loading Facility, the Glendale Burbank Interceptor Sewer, the Northeast Interceptor Sewer, the wastewater and water recycled water storage at the LA Glendale Wastewater Treatment Facility, and wastewater storage at the Donald C. Tillman Wastewater Treatment Facility. So you have before you, as Doug mentioned, the guiding principle report dated May 4th, 2005, which contains the vision which you see here. It also contains objectives and guiding principles for the One Water LA plan. And on this slide you see the vision. So One Water, it's a collaborative approach to develop an integrated framework for managing all the city's watershed, water resources, and wastewater facilities. And those wastewater facilities, by the way, include not only wastewater, but stormwater and recycled water facilities. And we want to do that, of course, in an environmentally and economically and socially beneficial manner. And we didn't create this vision in a vacuum. It's important to understand this vision was done with input of numerous stakeholders and all the other city departments that are involved in the One Water LA plan. And on the next slide, you'll see all those participants, and Doug is going to take it from here and talk to you about who's been involved and what our next steps are. Doug.
Thank you, Dave. Yes, as Dave mentioned, we've been working very collaboratively and closely with 13 other city departments listed here by their acronyms, and additionally having one-on-one meetings with 9 other regional agencies, because as mentioned previously in today's hearings, water has no jurisdictional or political boundaries. So it's very important that we touch base with folks like at Metropolitan Water District, Caltrans, High Speed Rail, MTA, LA County Sanitation, etc. And a lot of ideas are coming forward. So it's a very exciting time, because water is on everyone's lips, including those in the public as well. My analogy to explain to people what One Water is it's like it's a cabinet, and you've heard a lot about some of these existing plans that DWP and or sanitation is leading. All of those existing either current plans or plans that are underway go onto that shelf, and we will not forget any of those. We will link those together, and we will also determine what gaps, if any, may exist among those plans, because again, every drop is precious. We need to work together to treat all water throughout 2020 and on to 2040, as this plan does look that far out into the future. 41 policies were developed by working with all these agencies that we will be sharing with our external stakeholders. And this is what we've done through the first phase, which started just over a year ago. We've held 3 stakeholder workshops where we had upwards of 100 people at our media center offices to engage and talk about what the vision that Dave just read to you was, to develop the objectives that ultimately break out into about 35 guiding principles. In addition, we've had 5 steering committee meetings. Those are where all these city departments and regional agencies meet. They've brought more than one, in some cases, individuals to talk with us, to share different aspects of their facilities, their programs. The zoo is a very intricate place, for example. So we're really learning on how we can work with one and each other to reach these common objectives. We've had 4 advisory group meetings. These are key leaders in environmental communities, neighborhood councils, ratepayer advocate folks that are concerned about how much will this cost? Is it far-reaching enough? Bringing those folks in to help guide and steer how we even put together some of our meetings. It's been very, very helpful. All of these meetings are summarized in the report before you, and summarized also are the 35 guiding principles that came out from this process. Just to give you a sample of some of those guiding principles, enhancing coordination with various NGOs, neighborhood councils, and other stakeholders to inform them about integrated planning and broadening the community involvement. One Water, again, it's what we call the 3 I's: innovation, integration, and inclusion. Without any one of those, it's seen as something that's just that one city department is offering, and it really isn't. It's really all of us working together, breaking down those silos that we spent decades building together. Understanding the water balance that summarizes rainfall, runoff, water demands, wastewater flows, ocean discharges, to consider the potential for stormwater capture, water conservation, and reuse. Another one is emphasizing the multi-benefit projects based on measures of social, environmental, economic benefits, the triple bottom line as we refer to it. It's very important. You saw the slide in the previous presentation that Sharon presented, how $1 million of spending can offset $22 million in avoided cost. That is not lost upon any of us. including our stakeholders, and developing a transparent process that identifies opportunities for interdepartmental collaboration and cost sharing based on benefits that are aligned with department missions. One of the hardest things is often we know how much water costs, we know how much electricity costs. Sometimes it's hard to put value on capturing stormwater. We're going to attempt to do that because the multi-benefit approach is truly the answer to solving a lot of these difficult problems. We need to somehow evaluate that, and I think the ratepayer folks, the people concerned about how this impacts their rates, is really guiding us in that process. So that's important. We're also going to be looking at what's the cost of doing nothing. As engineers and planners, we always want to focus on that. Stakeholder engagement, been a cornerstone of the Water Integrated Resources Plan that I've been working on for the last 9 years, and how it's now dovetailing into this One Water LA effort, cultivating those relationships that we have with businesses and industries, various organizations, government, community offices. We're now working a lot more with universities. A lot of those colleges are coming forward to us. They want to help. They want to get involved. They have certain ideas. They want to study what we're doing and observe. They've been brought in the picture. It's very exciting what a lot of young folks have to say about how we're doing things as well, and how we should be working, doing things. So they're involved. We've had a lot of one-on-one meetings with other key community and business leaders. Over 300 stakeholders are on our mailing list thus far, and over 200 organizations are represented. Every time we go out into the community, which is every week, almost every weekend, we are increasing those numbers, and we're guiding people to connect with us through our brand new onewaterla.org website. So there's a lot of this information is on that site as well. Finally, our next steps are continuing discussions with city departments and regional agencies to increase the coordination and the partnerships. We have proposals out on the streets for the Phase 2 element of this planning. This is really where the hard work is going to happen. They're due on June the 8th, and we expect to select the team by July. And this is going to be an 18-month planning effort. Those over 40 policies that have been identified thus far, those will be refined, those will be prioritized. Some of the exciting things that we've been seeing come through, let's use recycled water for all the concrete that we use in the city to build these tall buildings, or any projects for that matter. So we're working with code experts and people in Bureau of Engineering and Building and Safety to try to break through and get the comfort level on using recycled water. There's no need to use potable water to make concrete. Potentially requiring drought-tolerant plants for residential homes and green infrastructure elements. It seems like a no-brainer, but in some cases it's not always on the forefront of some of these other planning efforts and projects. Recirculation systems for car fleets, planes, trains, and washing facilities. We're getting a lot more into transportation, so we've been working with Caltrans and Metro, so they're very excited. How can we get more of the recycled water out to their facilities so they can use it for truck washing facilities, as well as capturing stormwater that might come to their new stations that are underway in the planning effort for the next couple of decades. And again, continuing the outreach, engaging and developing the strategy. So Phase 2, which will commence in July, as I mentioned, is going to be followed by an additional year to develop a programmatic EIR. So all of these projects, regardless of what happens, we're looking at climate change, drought tolerant. We also are considering emergencies. When we went through the IRP, who knew that 9/11 would happen and that potentially Los Angeles would be considered a target, with our biggest treatment plant right next door to LAX. So we've got to think outside the box on those, plan for those, and have those projects ready in case we need to divert water to better manage it and to preserve water and increase our local supply. These guiding principles will lead the way to define projects and policies to achieve these objectives. Our stakeholder involvement has been very strong and will continue throughout this process. Once all these projects and policies are identified, further evaluation will lead to defining those projects, and which will include all the cost estimates. We get a gentleman who I think you all know his name, I won't mention him, who wants to know how much does this all cost. Well, we're at the very beginning of the process. We're just putting together the menu. We haven't done any selection yet, so we don't have any idea. That's what's unique about this process. Other cities will say, here's the plan, this is how much it's going to cost, will you pay for it? One Water and the Water IRP precursor does not work that way. So, and I mentioned we'll also evaluate the cost of doing nothing. So with that, our future belongs to those who understand that doing more with less is compassionate, prosperous, and enduring. Paul Hawkins said that. Happy to answer any questions that you have, Dave and I.
Sure. I mean, love the one water concept and everything that you're doing in this. It's great. I have a couple of questions that are much more specific on some of the items that were in the overall report. But Tillman, I like seeing the improvements there. Will much of the storage be used for irrigation or other purposes that's going on at Tillman now?
The storage at Tillman that exists is currently to help equalize the flows and to take in the wet weather water so we can treat more of it. And ultimately, all the water that we treat at Tillman goes to customers that have been set up through DWP, including several city facilities. And then ultimately, the longer range plan in the early 2020 period is to do groundwater replenishment. That's where we would do advanced treatment, typically at DCT, to meet the regulatory standards and to send that water through an existing 54-inch line to let it infiltrate through the East San Fernando spreading ground so that it will recharge our aquifers.
Great. And what's the ETA on the plant, on the advanced water purification facility in terms of?
We're anticipating that it would be online in 2021, 2022 timeframe.
Great. So that seems like it's on track?
Yes.
At that point, great. Also, something interesting about doing things at Forest Lawn regarding the reconstruction, recycle. Tell me a little bit about that. I saw that in there, but didn't know what exactly it was.
Is that the change up from Silver Lake? Forest Lawn's an existing customer for irrigation water, has been for a long time.
Reconstructing the Los Angeles Glendale Water Reclamation Plant and how it's located. It looked like there was a connection there with Forest Lawn. Or maybe there's not something. That's what it appeared like. There was something else going on there.
Oh, maybe it's the Forest Lawn in Glendale. I think, again, it's been an existing customer, and they do get all the water they need from the current treated effluent at LA Glendale.
Nothing new happening there.
Not to my knowledge. Maybe do some additional storage capacity at LA Glendale to even out the flows. We do get some low flows in the late hours of the night. So we can continue to support those existing customers. A lot of the additional water does help support the revitalization of the LA River as well, so we don't want to impact existing customers.
That makes sense. I thought there was
Something
looked like
new.
there was something new that I didn't understand that was happening there. But that's great. And the IRP triggered projects, I want to understand that better of what the triggers are in terms of population or otherwise, or how that moves.
One of the key early elements of our Phase 2 planning effort will be to put together a water balance. So really looking at our wastewater flows, our water demands. The DWP monitors quite closely, using available models and tools to see how, if there's any upticks, significant upticks in population or water consumption or resulting wastewater use, how that would impact our flows. Would that require us to divert wastewater to any plants typically? And maybe the project you were talking about earlier, Council Member, was related to how do we look at the East San Fernando Valley sewers that currently take flows to our LA Glendale plant, diverting those to our Donald C. Tillman plant, because that, as I said earlier, is where the advanced treatment would be, and that would help increase the losses that we've been seeing because of the great, wonderful conservation that DWP promotes, so we can keep those flows at capacity at Donald C. Tillman so that we can do more groundwater replenishment. So that might be referring to that. But as far as the triggers, looking at population through a water balance tool, looking at any regulations that we're constantly looking at, both from a water supply standpoint, but also from the water quality perspectives that we need, because we do look at Watershed, all the things that were talked about in the previous presentation. We do have a mind to incorporate too. How do we enhance capture and reuse through the EWIMP process and TMDL process? So it's like pulling all of those together and making sure what triggers that would necessitate any kind of new planning effort or to sharpen our pencils on the existing efforts.
But at the moment, it's kind of conceptual. There's not particular triggers in mind that when population reaches X or Y or something to that effect. At this point, what's in here is conceptual triggers. There's nothing in mind that you have as a
Right. I think we've, as being in this business for a long time, I think we've all been aware of the drought, with climate change, sea level rise, as different things happen throughout our country and throughout the world. I think, there's a lot of focus on that disaster preparedness. I don't know, David, if you want to add anything, but no new triggers. We just want to make sure that we are monitoring all of those flows and anything that would contribute to the increase or decrease of those flows.
Adele Hoshkley, just to add, when we did the IRP, the Integrated Resource Plan before, that's the discussion that was there about the savings. Based on the flow projections and the population growth, et cetera, we estimated that we needed to do these specific projects, expansion of the treatment plant at Tillman, Hyperion, building sewers across the valley and some other places. However, we said we're going to monitor the flow and the increase in flow to ensure that the projections are correct. And actually what we did is we saw the levels of flow are actually not growing at the same pace as was projected before. So that's why we had to plan a specific level of flow that you have to start the implementation of the project. And that has been kept moving further and further away as we were measuring the actual flows. So that's, to me, I think that's smart planning and smart investment, and that's what we need to do. Once we develop the projects, we're going to have the same triggers to ensure that the project will be measured to ensure when it's ready to go based on flows, numbers, compliance, we will move on it and allow us to give us time to have it in place when it's needed.
Thank you. Mr. Koretz?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Couple of quick questions. One, where does the San Fernando Valley Aquifer fit into all this? We have some money to start cleaning it up. When do we actually start? How much of the whole aquifer do we think we can clean up by the time we're done, and at what pace?
Well,
what do we use it for once we reach that?
Sure. Well, we anticipate that's about a $600 million cleanup project. That's the current estimate on it. We're hoping to get about 50% funding from Prop 1. We are also hoping that project will be online about the same time that the DCT recharge project into the San Fernando Basin comes online, so about 2021, 2022. We're hoping to have the cleanup project online. And the reality is what that project actually does is it treats all the water that comes out of the ground. So as far as the idea that all that contamination will go away, it's going to be there for a long period of time. But what we'll be doing through this project is we'll be treating all the contamination as it comes out of the ground and goes into our distribution system. So 2021, 2022, that's the target, to have that cleaned up. The way it fits into the Integrated Resources Plan is essentially that is going to be one of the key projects where we get water supply through recharging that groundwater basin through multiple means, through stormwater capture projects, through the GWR project that comes out of the Donald C. Tillman Water Reclamation Plant. And also, once we have a healthy groundwater basin, there may be opportunities for the city to purchase wet year water when it's inexpensive, store it in the San Fernando Basin, and on a conjunctive use basis, use that water in dry years when water is much more expensive.
Now, are we actually looking at the possibility of cleaning up the whole aquifer, or just a portion of it and then sort of siloing it off?
Well, yeah, again, what the concept really is that all the pumping that we do in the San Fernando Basin at the various locations will be treated. So they'll either be treated through a combination of wellhead treatment and centralized treatment, or just centralized treatment. And some of that, those decisions are going to be made as we move forward. Right now we're doing some wellhead treatment at some of the places in the San Fernando Basin where we think that essentially GAC type treatment, granular activated carbon treatment, can treat the type of contamination that are in those wellhead locations. Tongue is a good example where we're doing GAC treatment, and it's mostly the kind of treatment that can be handled with granular activated carbon. Some other areas where you have other types of contamination, that type of treatment isn't going to solve the problem. So in those areas where the plan is to bring that water to a centralized location, probably the Hollywood pump station area, build a large centralized treatment facility at that area. That's a good location for it because the water can get in anywhere into our distribution system from that location and that'll be the method of treating that water. But the idea is to treat the water as it comes out of the ground, all of it, as it comes out of the ground.
Very good. And one small odd side question that came up today. I was speaking with a local chamber of commerce, and a number of people complained that they were trying to be part of our turf removal program and that they had to provide a picture of their green lawn. And so people that have lawns that have gone somewhat brown are watering their lawns aggressively to get them green enough to get removed. Now, I don't know if that's a misunderstanding on their part, if it's overly aggressive approach on our part, but clearly it is an existent problem. So,
Mr. Koretz, you might recall that I introduced a motion, we heard it in this committee, that makes it so that brown turf qualifies for the turf removal, and the department testified in this committee honoring that. So they should take a picture of the brown grass.
But my point is, that's not the experience that people are having. So we're either not communicating it properly, somewhere in the process they're missing that. Yeah, and people are actually telling me that they have watered their brown lawns to qualify. So somewhere we are contributing to wasting water and as part of this process, whether it's education or bureaucracy or whatever, we need to address that.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, Chairman Fuentes is absolutely correct. I mean, we do not require the lawns to be green. We do require people to show us that they're actually removing turf through pictures, but the lawn doesn't have to be green. And it's hard to fight these urban myths once they get out there, and we have been trying to.
We need to make it clear, because I talked to people that actually had watered their lawns.
Yeah, I understand. Yeah, but it is not a requirement. Yeah.
Very good.
Very good. We'll take public comment. Brian Baracas. Ms. Winter, did you want to testify in this after all? Okay, thanks. Mr. Barajas.
All right. Well, as people have already figured out, without water, you have no ability to have a government, basically. And the issue here is, if anybody's interested, our organization, LaRouche PAC, has identified the fact that we have a situation where technology, I'm not just talking about what you just heard here about recycle this, recycle that.
Clearly, Mr. Barajas, the item before us here is about the one water concept that the Department of Water and Power and the Bureau of Sanitation just presented on. So if you could limit your comments.
Is this item 5?
Item 5.
Right. That's what I'm talking about. When I reference about the individual making these statements, as I read your items, these are facilities that would deal with water shortage. So this is the problem. We have a degenerate society where I speak of future and people say, you're not speaking on the item. I am. The issue is technology. What type of technology? That's the issue here. You deny people the fact to produce the water, like ocean water, or cause it to rain technology. Not this. These what was just mentioned here only apply when you have the technology that replenishes the water that you are using. But as long as you don't implement technology that replenishes what you used, then the comment on there where you do more with less is bogus, because you're losing it.
So the item here is number 5. We will go ahead and note and file the Bureau of Sanitation's reports and instruct the departments, sanitation, water and power, and staff from CAO, CLA, and other departments to report back in 180 days with the status and an update on phase 2. Since items 6, 7, and 8 are very similar with the same presenters, we'll go ahead and take all 3 of those together. And let's go ahead and take public comment on all of those before we have staff testify. Let's go ahead and have Liz Crossan, Brian Barajas. Yeah, those are the only two. Very good. We'll give you 3 minutes.
Good afternoon again. Liz Crossan for Los Angeles Waterkeeper. And I'm here in support of expanding our ability to use gray water in the city of LA. So far, LA has demonstrated leadership in developing measurable goals and policies to address this historic drought, and we've definitely seen results. Incentives for things like rain barrels and the turf removal program and water efficient appliances. It has had some success, and the message seems to be trickling down to the homeowners and residents of LA, but we still need to do a lot more. Just this week, the State Board did release the most current water use goal, or water use for the state, and LA DWP was at a 10% reduction as compared to 2013 numbers, which is better than what we saw last time, but it's still below the statewide 13% that we're seeing, and of course it's below the 25% mandate that we have from the governor. So we still have a ways to go. Here in LA, we're required to reduce 18%. So actions like these related to gray water and reducing our use of potable water, these are critically important to meeting not only our state mandates but also our city goals. So in particular, we support requiring new development to have gray water stub-outs. We also support adding provisions to the building code that expand the uses of gray water to toilet flushing as well as surface irrigation. And we'd like you to consider a comprehensive program that would partner with NGOs to provide incentives for gray water, training workshops, and perhaps a certification program for gray water vendors. We want to pave the pathway for people to be able to use gray water, but we want to make sure that there are standards in place similar to some of the issues that have come up with the turf removal program. So thank you very much.
Mr. Ross, Melanie, come on up too while you're...
Well, I looked up the what gray water was. I think it should be explained. If I'm wrong, people should interrupt me and tell me that that's not gray water. But the way I figure, or what I read, was gray water is not technically toilet water, but it's everything else that's, tub water or laundry water or whatever, but it's the same type of situation where you're recycling water that's been used. And like I said, I've been holding back what I really want to say. Governor Brown, because of his policy of reduction, instead of leading with improvements, essentially is killing people. Literally. And so that makes him a bona fide, qualified fascist. Because the Nazis did the same thing. No technology. Don't boost your economy in any meaningful way. And teach the people to hate each other for using a resource which is plentiful. As you know, we have an ocean. We can clean it. As you know, that we could cause it, well, maybe you didn't know, but there's an ocean atmosphere. And we have to tap into these resourceful ways to create the water that we humans need. So any philosophy that deals with the fact that we are not creating the water that we should have, but any philosophy that says recycle what you used, it's Nazi. And what's the genocide in that process? When you don't create the water that you could actually give the people when they're wondering why they're getting sick with the water that they're using that's being recycled. It's a gas chamber effect. So let's use technology. Let's save, with the implementation with desal or ionization water modifications, we can actually implement these technologies and save countries like Africa. And all the fascists who believe in this philosophy, I have to tell you, when Kennedy died, the future died.
Mr. Barajas, the item before us is with respect to gray water.
I know it's recycled. It's recycled water. Am I right?
American buildings.
What's your definition with gray water?
There isn't anything about Africa or fascism.
I know, but it's limiting technology. So, in your definition, what's gray water to you? Can you tell me what gray water is? Is it recycled water? Yes or no?
I'm sorry, his clock isn't running. Well, actually, it might be, but this one here isn't running.
It is now.
Okay, very good.
So it's recycled water, essentially. Am I right? What I'm talking about is creating water.
Ezra.
Good afternoon, council members. My name is Ezra Gale with the Building Industry Association. We represent 1,100 builders throughout the Los Angeles and Ventura counties. We'll keep our remarks brief today. We've had the pleasure of working with building and safety staff as they craft their list of recommendations pursuant to the Mayor's Directive 5 with regards to water conservation. We believe that this, and as staff will say, is directly in line with the motions before you here today. We certainly have some reservations with regard to mandating gray water usage at this time, but would like to explore the continued possibilities of incentivizing and getting some more studies back on the most effective ways to utilize gray water. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Ms. Winters.
Good afternoon again. Melanie Winter, Director of the River Project. With respect to gray water, we've been, with our Water LA program, which Adel Hajj-Khalil referenced earlier, we have had the opportunity to work for the last 4 years with Building and Safety, Department of Water and Power, and other city agencies on looking at both rainwater capture, stormwater management, and gray water systems in residential homes, and what the barriers are to implementation, be they financial or social or bureaucratic. We've had the wonderful experience of working with one of the most amazing city staff you've ever had, Osama Yunan, on tweaking the existing gray water application for branch drain systems to make it simpler. We've implemented several of those systems through the Water LA program, as well as numerous laundry to landscape systems. This is something that residents are very interested in doing, making it as simple as possible for them, and even incentivizing it can have tremendous benefits. I think looking at programs that are in place in Tucson, that are doing the things we're talking about in these motions here, adapting the lid to make it possible, not necessarily installing in new development, but at least installing the application, the apparatus to make it feasible, is a simple first step, and we've great opportunities to learn from Tucson's success and failures and adjustments in that process. One of our neighbors doing this quite well. I suggest that we continue this conversation to look at taking on our own studies on the benefits of gray water, the barriers and the benefits of the various gray water systems, and how that can move us forward towards a more comprehensive understanding of the water system in Los Angeles. One of the great things that it does is it helps people to tap into the different elements of water: rainwater, groundwater, imported water supply, and recycled water. And when you use a gray water system at home, you have a better connection to the recycled water that we're planning to launch big time here in Los Angeles. And it's a small scale version of the same thing, gently used wash water that can support tree canopy. As you know, we would like to continue to expand our tree canopy, especially in climate vulnerable communities in Los Angeles, without increasing potable supplies. Gray water can be a component of that. It can also help low income communities and others who want to grow fruit trees at home for local food. Gray water is a terrific supply for that. We fully support continuing to take gray water seriously, make it as easy as possible for residents, offer classes, support trainings, make it part of our water portfolio moving forward.
Thank you. We'll invite Mr. Pettyjohn and Mr. Yunan up, please. Items 6, 7, and 8.
Yes, good afternoon, Chairman Fuentes, council members. I'm David Pettyjohn. I'm the Director of Water Resources for LA Water and Power. And with me today is Osama Yunan. He's the Division Chief at the LA Department of Building and Safety, and Shahram Karagani, who's the Watershed Protection Manager at LA Sanitation. We're going to be discussing these three items with you today. Shahram is going to be discussing the low impact development ordinance question that you raised. Osama will be discussing the current code requirements and permitting fees associated with simple gray water systems, revising the green building codes and establishing gray water standards. And I'll be going over our research on existing gray water studies and rebate programs that other water agencies and utilities run, and our recommendations for actions by the city. And with that, I'll hand it off to Shahram first.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, council members. Shahram Karagani, Watershed Protector for the city, LA Sanitation. The low impact development ordinance, as you know, stormwater from private development is regulated, and hopefully soon, based on your motion, Mr. Chair, public right of way also would be regulated by LA Sanitation under the city's low impact development ordinance. The LID ordinance is a part of LAMC Chapter 6, Article 4.4 of Los Angeles Municipal Code, a code titled Stormwater and Urban Runoff Pollution Control, and regulates stormwater and non-stormwater discharges into any storm drain system and receiving water. Under the LID ordinance, all developments and redevelopments projects incorporate a stormwater management strategy to mitigate the impacts of runoff and stormwater pollution. LID requirements help remove nutrients, bacteria, metals, toxics, while reducing the volume and intensity of stormwater flows. Because the purpose of the LID is to improve water quality, a mandate off of our MS4 permit, amending the LID ordinance for the new single-family and low-density multi-family buildings to include gray water step-outs is not deemed to be the right section of the code. The more appropriate section of the code we propose to be the plumbing section that people have to follow, and the gray water is also being analyzed further under on one water plan. That concludes my remarks.
You know, before we move on, so understanding that one section of the code would be more appropriate, can you also tell us what today is permissible with gray water? Because I also know that you don't have to take permits out for some gray water use. What is it that's permissible? Because some of these here intend to do more than what is currently on the books. What is permissible today?
Mr. Chair, if you allow me,
Safety, yeah.
Yes, it would be the best position to answer that question.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and council members. Osama Yunan with Building and Safety. Today's plumbing code allows gray water for multiple uses. So laundry to landscape, which is a system that only uses the washing machine to go, without having to cut into the pipe. That does not require a permit. And to our best knowledge, that's the most common system throughout the state. The other systems, they call them simple. They're basically they're more involved than just a clothes washer. You can get it from the showers, from the lavatories, anything basically except toilet water and kitchen sink. And those can be used, if untreated, they can be used for below grade irrigation. But if they are treated, they can be used for flushing toilets, urinals, and other uses that are non-potable.
And those you currently need permits for in order to do that?
Correct.
And it's also regulated by the County of Los Angeles?
Health Department. Right,
Okay,
both
very
of us. So the only one exempt from permit is the clothes washer system.
Got it. So as it relates to what is trying to be accomplished here in 6, 7, and 8, we heard 6, there's a different section that is more suitable, and 7 and 8 green building code versus putting together a new menu for simple to complex systems. Your recommendations for us?
Right. So can I take them all in order?
Please.
Okay. So as far as the mandating of the gray water, in response to the Mayor's Executive Directive 5 and in line with this motion.
Which one? Which motion? Which item?
Number 7.
Okay.
So what we've done is we drafted an ordinance and submitted to the city attorney, and one of the requirements in there is to mandate that all new buildings be gray water ready. Part of the challenge in gray water is you got to separate the gray water fixtures, like the showers, from the toilets. So in an existing building, they're all mixed up.
Right.
And if you have slab on grade, for example, you're digging concrete to try to separate them. So going forward, we are recommending that just separate them while in the construction stage, which hardly doesn't cost a whole lot, and then put them in an accessible point, so in the future, if an owner decides to have gray water on that property, we save them all that cost. That's in line with the stuff we've done in the past, solar ready, EV ready. So that's our recommendation, and hopefully we can have that going to the Plum Committee as soon as the city attorney's finished reviewing it.
Very good. And we would also like to, that recommendation for this committee would be to continue it and instruct all relevant departments to prepare the reports for a future hearing, and then assuming that Plum would also hear it as well. Okay.
The second item, Mr. Chair, you mentioned is which is also item 7, is established standards for gray water treatment system. That's already in the code. So that's permissible, and we would like to see those start coming in.
Got it.
Would you like me to take item 8 too?
Yes, please. Sure.
Eliminate fees. As you know, Mr. Chair, we are an enterprise fund department, waiving fees. We can't do that, but we would be happy to work with some kind of a program through the water purveyors if they have incentives to pay back the customer their permit fee. We would work with them to make sure that the incentives are paid to systems that are already installed and functional, and we could establish a system to help with that. What we've done on the water, gray water system for single-family dwellings and residential in general, we have created a standard plan. So instead of the homeowner or whoever they hire draw their own plans, we've actually created that plan for them. So all they have to do is fill in the blanks, and we issue those right over the counter. But the only thing we have not been able to do is waive the fee.
Got it. Very good.
Thank you, Osama. So I'm going to give you a response to number 6. So first, we took a three-pronged approach to item number 6. First, we looked at and researched and analyzed the relevant available stormwater gray water studies that exist out there. Second, we investigated existing incentive programs offered by other water agencies. And third, we conducted interviews with other utilities with gray water programs that are ongoing. So our findings from this research are included in your report you have before you today, and I'll just highlight a little bit of what we found. So first, the relevant available gray water studies, white papers, and technical memoranda we reviewed were done by several different cities, and those are included in our response. But overall, these studies indicated that gray water systems are costly and in general are not properly maintained by people who install them after they're installed. In regards to the customer cost, the studies indicated that the more simple laundry to landscape style programs cost between $250 if a homeowner installs them themselves, up to $750 if a contractor were to install the laundry to landscape gray water system. The more complex systems cost from about $2,000 for a homeowner installed device to up to $4,000 for a contractor installed complex gray water system. So on the water savings front, the study's results were contradictory and inconclusive. The City of Long Beach reported in their 2012 study that average household water use actually increased by 23 gallons per day after the installation of a gray water system. The City of Santa Rosa reported that a few households saved water while others actually used more water after installing a gray water system. So why this contradictory water savings? Well, the study surmised that homeowners may be using gray water to irrigate, but then not reprogramming their existing irrigation control systems. Homeowners may also be using gray water systems to irrigate new garden areas specifically fed by the gray water, rather than decreasing their existing landscape irrigation. And finally, the studies could not definitively determine if the water savings were only attributable to gray water systems or if they also included savings from other conservation measures that the homeowner also implemented. So second, we investigated existing gray water incentive programs for water utilities that offer gray water financial incentives. And as I mentioned, the cost to install ranges from about $250 to $4,000 for the more complex systems. And the water utility rebates that we found range from about $75 for a system up to $200, depending on the complexity of the system being installed. Third, we conducted utility interviews with water agencies with gray water systems, and from our interviews with these utilities, we were able to learn about the types of existing rebates they offer, their estimated water savings, their cost to run the program, and their gray water challenges that they've faced. And these utility interviews confirmed one of the fundamental findings also contained in the studies that we looked at, and that was that water savings from gray water systems are difficult to quantify. All agencies reported difficulty in quantifying these water savings, and the majority simply used assumed water savings based on an estimated number of laundry loads per week, or they used assumed square footage of irrigated area to calculate their savings. One utility, the San Francisco Public Utilities Commission, they actually did look at the water consumption pre and post installation, yet the water consumption was actually split 50-50 between customers that ended up using less water after installation and those that used more. So the utilities we spoke to also reported that their gray water rebate programs have low customer participation, quite low actually, which makes their program costs less cost effective, and that most customers only participated in the laundry to landscape programs, not the more complicated gray water programs. So basically, water utility agencies viewed gray water incentive programs as educational tools. One important point of information is that the Long Beach Water Department, they did conduct a gray water pilot study, and after they completed that study, they concluded that they would not offer a gray water incentive for those systems. So what is the city currently doing in the area of gray water systems? So LADWP currently does actually offer rebates up to $250,000 for gray water systems through our technical assistance program. And these are for all our commercial customers that want to install these systems, and also for our multifamily residential customers who want to install these systems. For single-family residential customers, the city currently incentivizes installation of laundry to landscape gray water systems, as Osama mentioned, by not requiring a plan check or permit fees. The city currently offers multiple gray water education and outreach opportunities, and I'll mention a few of those. The Department of Building and Safety has a website that has information on gray water systems. LADWP's website has a dedicated gray water information page designed to educate our customers on gray water systems and installation. And we also are currently working to provide more information about gray water systems and promote effective gray water system use and installation and maintenance through the development of an educational outreach program that we're currently working on for residential gray water systems. Last year we partnered with the LA Gray Water Alliance, and we hosted 3 workshops on gray water systems in the community, teaching customers how to install, maintain these systems, what the benefits are, what the challenges of owning one are, what the costs are, and the regulatory requirements are. These workshops were held on October 1st, 22nd, and November 13th of 2014. But in conclusion, I want to emphasize that we do plan to continue these incentives that we currently have. We plan to continue our outreach and education programs. However, based on our research, our interviews, and our analysis, LADWP could not verify quantifiable water savings benefits necessary to justify the costs associated with offering a rebate and allocating staff resources toward the development of a residential gray water incentive program at this time. But I just want to assure your committee that we will continue all of our existing efforts on gray water. And with that, we'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Mr. Blumenfield.
Curious, you talk about I get that it's hard to figure out what the savings are. I always like to see the savings measured in terms of return on investment. So I don't know if there's any way to quantify if you assume an average amount of laundry being done, how long would it take to get back that, and you assume perfect displacement, so forgetting adding more water or less water, how long would it take to pay for a system like that to pay for itself? Because certainly that's what probably most people are going to ask when they're purchasing a system.
That's exactly the right question, and the challenge is that from the research that we found, it's very difficult to determine exactly how much water is actually being saved, and in some cases, as I mentioned, that water use actually goes up, so you've got a negative return on investment. So it's a real big challenge to try to quantify that.
The water use is going up because people aren't doing perfect displacement. They're double watering, or they're using the water to create a garden or something to that effect.
Right.
There's no, independent of that, it's not like water use would go up because you have a great water system, would it?
No, it's just, it depends on the behavior change that you're targeting. If somebody is not reprogramming their irrigation system, or they're just planting a garden that's fed by the gray water system, and then if the gray water system isn't providing enough water, they're augmenting that water supply. It just depends on the behavior, and so it's really difficult to quantify.
I don't know if it's possible to take all, control for all those factors and assume a perfect displacement of water that a user would use, and how long that would take to return. I'd love to have that kind of statistic, because I would imagine over time, people may displace at first, but once gray water becomes more common, then it'll be seen more as part of the water supply. And who's to say this person wasn't going to have that other garden anyway, and they put the water in so that they could justify it. But so that would be, for me, in terms of looking at these statistics, would be a useful one. Certainly if I'm going to try to help sell this to my constituent. I mean, I think of it as a user. That's the first thing I would want to know.
Sure.
And with the laundry, I always heard there was issues with the phosphates in the detergent.
That is true. You've got boron and salt and often chlorine in some of the laundry detergents. If you're going to install one of these systems, you have to use environmentally friendly detergents. They're quite a bit more expensive than the normal commercially available detergents, but that is a requirement that a homeowner would have to convert over to those more expensive detergents.
And for the other systems, the more expensive ones that use your drains and everything else, does that produce more water, or is it really the laundry that produces the most water in terms of gray water?
Well, if you're going to recirculate more of your water through a larger system and not just the water that's going through your clothes washing machine, you would produce more gray water on site, yes.
And then the financial incentive, the other things, I would assume PACE financing could be used for this kind of thing as well as the rebates.
I'm not aware of PACE financing for gray water systems, but it may exist. I just may not be aware of it.
Well, it's permissible under state law. Whether or not we do it locally, I guess,
right,
is the question, because it's for any sort of water conservation measure.
Yeah, currently, we don't have a PACE financing mechanism for gray water systems in the city.
I guess if we're going to move forward with this, I would love to see that incorporated as well, just as another tool, as all of these things. If and when gray water becomes a bigger piece of this, there's no reason why that shouldn't be part and parcel of our water conservation financing tools. Mr. Kretz.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, this is obviously the bizarrest, most alternate universe result of a study that I ever could have imagined, that we actually find somewhere that use of gray water in any way actually increased water usage. So I would love to know more about those studies and find where the flaws were in either the study or the behavior. I mean, even if people didn't adjust the watering of their landscaping and their landscaping was just watered better by the additional water from the system, it doesn't explain why water usage would go up. And particularly if people purchase these to deal with the drought and reduce their water usage, how they would turn around and use more water, it certainly makes absolutely no sense. So I think we'd want to dig deeper into this. I'd certainly love to know, first of all, whether the statistics were pre the period of intense drought or not. Because clearly, if anything in the last year, people would do this with an eye towards substantially less water usage, and that's the whole reason we're looking at this. If people are actually going to increase their water usage, we shouldn't even be incentivizing it. We should be removing our incentives, and I can't believe that's the case. So I think we both need to find out whether those statistics are really accurate And if they are, do some sort of focus group with people whose water rates substantially increase to figure out what behaviors are leading to exactly the opposite of what would make sense in this universe. So I don't know if there's a way to do that, but just based on the studies, it seems like the impossible is possible, and we can be trying to conserve water and we're actually increasing its usage. It doesn't make any sense at all. So I'd want to dig deeper before we abandon the idea of doing more with this. I also would like to see us beyond the idea of just incentivizing the simple systems, incentivize or at least find a way to waive the permit for the more complex systems. I viewed one in a constituent's home in Encino where they actually have a little bit of a treatment set up as well, and it cost a few $1,000s, and their water bill is almost nothing because they use this water for most of their uses. They fill a swimming pool with it, they do all their landscaping. I don't know if they flush their toilets as well, but most of their water usage is eliminated. So rather than the experience of increasing their water usage, they've done exactly what you'd expect, which is they've virtually eliminated their water bill. And that's obviously what we're getting after. So I don't know if it's the simple systems that people aren't using properly, but the complex ones that give you more access and you've invested more, so you recognize you have to conserve more. I don't know. But all of this is a very, very strange result, so I wish we could look into it with a deeper dive to see if there's some way to make this work. Because my understanding is a quarter of the city's total water supply is in gray water if we were able to actually access it. If it actually generates other water usage, obviously we would react very differently than if we felt we were saving substantial water use. So I'd ask that we drill down to that. I'd like to know also more about this lack of maintenance of systems. What are people doing or not doing that is causing these systems not to be maintained, whether it's the cheap systems that aren't maintained or the more expensive systems. I don't think there are many of the really expensive systems that I'm talking about, the one where they treat to some degree on site. But we should make that process easier and more streamlined certainly as well.
I'll try to answer one of your questions on the maintenance problems that have come up. City of Santa Rosa, they reported that some of their subsurface irrigation that was done with gray water systems does require periodic mulch replacement of the mulch that covers the irrigation system and removal of decomposed mulch. And the city reported to us that homeowners who had installed these gray water systems 3.5 years ago had still not replaced the mulch. So they've been having a problem with homeowners understanding the requirements to replace the mulch that covers the underground systems. They also indicated that some systems they saw were experiencing pooling and runoff of the gray water from the property. So that was a couple of problems that they experienced in Santa Rosa. The studies on the more complex gray water systems, some of the maintenance issues associated with those related to the filters and the pumps and the tanks that are required to temporarily collect and treat the gray water. And the maintenance issues in these systems, including the fact that the water was being held for longer than 24 hours in the retention basins, that the filters had to be replaced fairly regularly due to clogging with particulate matter in the gray water, and that the pumps also needed replacement periodically due to clogging that occurs from the particulate matter. So the gray water systems in general do require quite a bit more maintenance, and for the homeowner to be much more educated and active in maintaining these systems. And so that presents a challenge that some of the other conservation measures that the city is currently incentivizing don't require.
Okay, thank you.
All right, so let's go ahead and on 7 and 8, make sure that we prepare and finalize the reports, and then on all of them, we'll continue the items so that we can drill down deeper. But on 7 and 8, we'll refer those as well to the Plum Committee for their consideration. Hearing and seeing no objection, that will be the order. That takes us to public comment. Brian Barajas.
Okay. I guess,
Mr. Clerk, it's 2 minutes for Mr. Barajas for public comment. Thank you. And if you could just limit your comments to the items before the Energy and Environment Committee.
Great. Well, I'll make a general comment then on that. Obviously, your energy and your environment has one issue at hand. Either you improve it or you do not. And that's the issue that I take up. Now, you're not, basically. But anyways, I want to turn in this beautiful EIR that's called The Drought and the Presidency. And what it goes through is not only what you could do about the drought, but having a president that can take care of that, but it also goes through the Nazification of limiting your energy and your environment. That is what I opened with about improving that situation. Obviously, you are in a crisis. You would agree. But the issue here is, how do you deal with a crisis? Do you just restrict people their ability to use something, or do you increase the resource that they need by using technology? And obviously, you increase it by multiple factors of technology. So basically, look at your environment, look at your energy. You need to upgrade everything. You do not have to degrade what you already have or use what you think that you could reuse and think that that's an improvement. It's not. You have to create the resource that you need. So if I told you, how do you make it rain, or how do you clean the ocean's water, that takes on a profound outlook on life, not just reusing what you already used.
We're adjourned.